Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Roxanne Wood. The only evidence found at the crime scene was a drop of semen. It took 35 years for the victim's relatives to discover who brutally took the life of their loved one. Roxanne Woods was born on April 15, 1956, in the small town of Nels, Michigan. She was the first child in the family, followed by younger sister Janet. When Roxanne was 16, her younger brother Brad was born. Then their parents' marriage began to deteriorate. When Brad was 2 years old, her parents separated and filed for divorce. The children had to split their time between their mother's and father's homes. So Roxanne took on the role of caring for and comforting her younger siblings, Janet and Brad. Roxanne had a challenging life, but she was cheerful, friendly, and sociable as she grew up. After completing her studies at the age of 17, she started working as a manager at a small company that manufactured steel tanks, specifically in the customer service department. One day, a handsome young man came to the office. When she first saw him, Roxanne complimented him, then they had a conversation. The young man's name was Terry Wood, and he was the boss's son. When Roxanne got home after work, she excitedly told younger sister that it was the happiest day of her life because she had met a wonderful boy and had fallen in love with him at first sight. Roxanne and Terry began dating, and 8 years later, in 1982, they got married. The couple settled into a home in their hometown of Nels, Michigan. Both worked as managers in the customer service department of Terry's father's company. Their daily routine consisted of waking up, having breakfast, and going to work together in the same office. They would return home for lunch, take a break, go back to work, and then come home together in the evening. Roxanne tells Terry that she feels suffocated by their constant togetherness. She believes that it is damaging their relationship, leading to boring arguments. Roxanne left her father-in-law's company and found a job as a manager at a plastic parts manufacturer in South Bend, Indiana. The brief separation during the day helped her and her husband maintain their relationship, and everything was going well. They began to live a normal life together. In her free time, Roxanne enjoyed cooking and often baked a variety of sweet pastries. She also loved growing roses in their yard, as she appreciated creating beauty around her. 5 years passed, and during this time, the Roxanne family remained childless. The couple continued to live together, work and manage the household, unaware of the tragic fate that awaited them. On Thursday, February 19, 1987, Roxanne and Terry went to work as usual. In the evening, they each drove separately to a restaurant in downtown Niles to meet for dinner. After dinner, they decided to relax at a local bowling club with some friends. When Roxanne entered the club with Terry, she quickly attracted the attention of everyone around her because of her attractiveness and elegance. The couple enjoyed a night of bowling at the club, which was mostly filled with men. After 11 o'clock, Roxanne told her husband that it was time to go home because she had to get up early for work the next day. Terry wanted to stay and play one last round. Roxanne hugged him, kissed him, and said she was going home. Terry said goodbye and reminded her to drive carefully. Roxanne left alone while Terry stayed at the club to play one more round before driving home. He returned home about 45 minutes after Roxanne and assumed she was asleep. Terry parked his car in the garage and went into the kitchen. Terry witnessed a horrifying scene. His wife, Roxanne, lying on the floor in a pool of blood, her panties down to her ankles. Terry rushed to her side, hoping she was still alive. He lifted her head and tried to check her pulse, but quickly realized she was dead. In a panic, he rushed to the phone. He slipped on the bloody floor but managed to stay on his feet. He called the local police station and shouted into the phone, saying that his wife was dead in the house. Terry screamed and asked the police to come quickly, right now. The police asked Terry to calm down because they did not understand what he was saying. Terry's aggressive behavior on the phone was alarming, and when the police arrived at the Terry family home, Roxanne's death caused him to explode in rage, screaming uncontrollably. The police were forced to put him in the back of a patrol car and take him to the station for questioning. When they arrived, Terry immediately requested a lawyer, which raised further suspicions among the police. The autopsy revealed that 30-year-old Roxanne Wood had died from a stab wound to the neck. Forensic experts found only one piece of evidence at the crime scene, a drop of semen. In 1987, DNA testing had not been conducted, so the evidence was stored in the archives. During their search of the house, police found no signs of forced entry. Terry told police that they had a problem with the back door of their home, saying it was not working properly. Roxanne was found on the floor next to the kitchen cabinets, and the cutlery drawer was open. A fillet knife was missing, leading police to believe that it was the weapon used in the crime. Police found it strange that an intruder could enter the home without a weapon. When police looked into Roxanne's case, all information pointed to her husband, Terry, as the suspect. The investigation into the couple revealed that both Terry and Roxanne had been unfaithful to each other. When the police discovered this, they considered jealousy as a possible motive for the crime, especially on Terry's part. However, Roxanne's relatives did not believe Terry was capable of such violence. Although they acknowledged that he could be rude, yell, and insult others, they did not think he would commit such a brutal act. They believed that someone else was responsible for the crime. Despite their suspicions, the prosecutor's office determined that there was insufficient evidence to charge Terry with Roxanne's death. After the investigation, there were still no new clues, so the investigation was stalled. For many years, the case remained unsolved. Many Nelson residents blamed Terry for Roxanne's death. He was often cursed in public, with people calling him a beast and a monster. Despite this, Terry continued to live in Nelson, working for his father's company, keeping his personal life private and avoiding contact with journalists. A year after the tragedy, in 1988, Roxanne's younger sister Janet married Terry's brother, Robert Wood, who also worked at their father's steel tank manufacturing company. Janet and Robert were the only ones still actively searching for the criminal, even though the police had given up and believed the case would never be solved. In 1999, there was a significant development in DNA research related to the Roxanne Wood case, which had stagnated for 12 years. A DNA sample from the crime scene was added to the National DNA Database, but no matches were found. Terry, Roxanne's husband, agreed to provide his DNA for comparison, but it also did not match the sample from the crime scene. 20 years went by, during which a significant amount of information was gathered regarding the case. In 2020, police brought in a professor and a group of students from Western Michigan University to digitize the case materials and enter them into an electronic database. The students worked on roughly 3,500 pages of handwritten reports, notes, and other relevant information. The professor noted that after 30 years of collecting data, police may have overlooked important details during the investigation. Around the same time the students started digitizing the data, the police investigating Roxanne's case reached out to a company that specializes in genetic genealogy. However, a new issue arose. The semen samples from the crime scene were poorly preserved. The usable portion was only about 3% of the amount normally needed for research. They had never worked with such a small amount before. However, the researchers still tried to identify the criminal's DNA. The experts spent about 10 months on the project, but were ultimately unable to produce any results. Their efforts were in vain. The president of the genealogy company was very upset about the failure of the project, One day, the president of the genealogy company discussed this issue with his employee, Gabriela Vargas, and asked her to take over the project, promising to support its progress. In April 2021, Gabriela began her work. Colleagues considered Gabriela to be one of the most talented researchers in genetics. A few months later, Gabriela created a genetic profile using DNA analysis. She quickly discovered that the man was of Balkan Caucasian origin. Using the online service GetMac, Gabriela was able to build the criminal's family tree. Police identified the killer's parents, a couple born around 1920 who had 3 sons. This meant their sons were likely born in the 1940s and 1950s. With information from Gabriela, police quickly identified 3 brothers, eliminating 2 as suspects. That left only 1 brother, who had a significant criminal record. Michigan State Police believe they have finally identified Roxanne Wood's killer after 34 years, Patrick Gilham. In 2021, Patrick Gilham, 66, lived just a few miles from Roxanne Wood in South Bend, Indiana, where she also worked. Patrick was an alcoholic and a drug addict. When police looked into his criminal record, they discovered that 8 years before Roxanne was murdered, he had been charged with assaulting another woman. Back in 1979, a young mother named Maureen Farrick lived in Gary, Indiana, with her husband Robert and their 2 daughters, ages 3 and 2. Maureen was an art teacher at a local high school. Robert described his wife as beautiful, kind, and social, always ready to help others. In September 1979, as Robert's business trip was coming to an end, he planned to return home late that evening. He called his wife, informing her that he didn't have the house keys, and asked her to leave the side door unlocked for him. After 11 p.m., as Robert was walking home, he noticed several police cars parked near his house. Maureen ran out and told him that a stranger had attacked her that night. She was sleeping on the 2nd floor with her daughters when she heard noises coming from downstairs. Concerned, she decided to investigate and went downstairs to see what was going on. She noticed a man going through her purse. When he saw her, he pushed her to the ground near the stairs and tried to attack her, but he was unsuccessful. He eventually stole her purse and escaped. Maureen remained silent throughout the incident, fearing that her daughters, who were sleeping on the 2nd floor, would wake up. After the attacker left, she called the police and provided a description of him. About a week later, Patrick, 24, was stopped by police for a traffic violation. An officer noticed credit cards next to him that belonged to Maureen Farrick. Patrick was arrested and taken to the police station. During questioning, he explained that he had entered Maureen's house through an open side door and that he had stolen her purse. In 1979, Patrick Gilham was charged with burglary and unlawful deviant behavior. He pleaded guilty at his trial and was sentenced to 14 years in prison. However, he served only 7 years in an Indiana prison before being released on parole for good behavior. In 2021, police began searching for Patrick Gilham to collect a DNA sample to compare with the profile of the criminal in Roxanne's case. In May 2021, they found Patrick Gilham, 66, in South Bend, Indiana. While driving his pickup truck, he threw a cigarette butt out the window. Police took the cigarette butt, which contained his saliva, and sent it for analysis. A few days later, the test results did not match, surprising the police. They were certain that Patrick was involved in Roxanne Wood's case. They then decided to take another DNA sample from Patrick, suspecting that they might have accidentally taken the wrong cigarette butt. In July 2021, Patrick was under continuous observation. One day, he visited a laundromat, and a police watching him decided to wait nearby, believing Patrick would eventually come out. The police positioned himself on the sidewalk next to the laundromat. His prediction came true when Patrick stepped outside, lit a cigarette, and sat just a meter away from police, unaware that he was being watched. The police greeted Patrick and they exchanged a few words. After about 2 minutes, Patrick returned to the laundromat, leaving behind a cigarette butt. The police collected the cigarette butt with gloves, bagged it, and sent it for forensic analysis. The analysis showed a near 100% match, but the police decided not to immediately arrest Patrick. Instead, they planned to bring him in for questioning. Patrick was told that the police needed to discuss an old case with him. During Patrick's questioning, the police asked him if he knew anyone named Roxanne. He replied that he knew 2 people by that name. One was a stripper, and the other was an alcoholic. They then showed him a picture of Roxanne and asked if he recognized her. He said he had never met her. They showed him both old and new pictures, but he continued to deny ever seeing her. When the police informed Patrick of what had happened to Roxanne, he became anxious. His body tensed, his hands shook, and he slammed his hands on the table, seemingly hoping that the interrogation would end. Throughout the interrogation, Patrick maintained his innocence, often answering questions with phrases like, "He don't remember" or "He don't know." The interrogation lasted for 5.5 hours. Eventually, Patrick stated that he needed a lawyer and he was allowed to go home. 7 months later, in February 2022, Patrick was arrested at his home in South Bend, Indiana. Around the same time, nearly all local media reported on the reopening of this high-profile case. Following this, a woman contacted the police to share a story she had kept to herself for nearly 35 years. In the summer of 1987, just a few months after Roxanne Wood's death, Patrick attempted to attack another victim in South Bend. It was an evening when Rose Perel decided to water her garden. While she was outside with a hose, she heard a car drive by. A Chevrolet El Camino stopped near her house. Rose initially ignored it, but when she finished watering and turned to go inside, she noticed a man wearing a black baseball cap and a black beard getting out of the car and walking toward her. Rose sensed that the stranger intended to harm her, so instead of returning to her house, she ran to her neighbors for safety. Thankfully, they quickly opened the door and allowed her in. Trembling with fear, Rose called the police, but by that time, the unknown man had already disappeared. A few days later, while driving around town with her husband, Rose spotted the same Chevrolet El Camino parked at a gas station. There was nobody inside the vehicle. Rose's husband decided to keep watch over the empty car while she went to find a phone to call the police. When Rose returned, she found her husband confronting the stranger. Her husband held a gun and told him to stay put. The man was 32 years old, with dark hair and a thick beard. Rose asked him to show her his driver's license. She read out his name, Patrick Gilham. Rose and her husband then allowed Patrick to leave, but warned him that they would use force if he came near their home again. Rose then went to the local police station and reported her situation, also naming Patrick Gilham. She never saw him again and believes the police took no action. It wasn't until 35 years later that Rose recognized Patrick on the news and decided to share her story. She believes that if the police had taken her testimony seriously in 1987, the Roxanne Wood case could have been solved much sooner. In April 2022, Patrick's trial finally occurred. He did not confess to the crime and claimed he had no memory of the events. When Janet Wood spoke during the trial, Patrick appeared horrified as he looked at her. Janet and Roxanne resembled each other closely, leading some to believe that Patrick thought he was face-to-face with Roxanne, which frightened him. Ultimately, Patrick Gilham was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 19 years. All suspicion was cleared against Roxanne's husband, Terry Wood. Terry was emotional and confused, crying in the courtroom. For 35 years, He had been the prime suspect in his wife's murder, and now justice had been served. He continued to avoid the press and kept his private life private. Roxanne's family finally found peace. Her siblings Janet and Brad were relieved to learn the truth. Janet shared that after the trial, she had a dream in which she and Roxanne were walking near the cemetery gates. They were laughing and talking, as Roxanne told Janet that it was time for her to leave. She reassured her loved ones not to worry or cry, saying that she was fine. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Tracy Hallett and J.B. Beasley. J.B. Beasley was born on July 31, 1981, in Troy, Alabama, to Cheryl and Hilton Lanier J.B. After her parents divorced in 1984, J.B. moved to Dothan with her mother. Her mother later married Joey Begun, who became J.B.'s loving stepfather, and she and her 4 sisters grew up in a house in Dothan. She was an outgoing girl who enjoyed a variety of activities, including cheerleading, dance lessons, playing the piano, and swimming. J.B. and her sisters also modeled for several companies. During high school, she met Tracy Hallett, with whom she quickly formed a close friendship. Tracy was born on March 3, 1982, to Carolyn and Robert Hallett, a police officer with the Dothan Police Department. Her life took a dramatic turn when her father died when Tracy was 5 years old. Her mother then married Mike Roberts, who raised Tracy with her mother. Unlike her friend J.B., Tracy was shy but always put others before herself. As the eldest in the family, she took her responsibilities very seriously, especially when it came to her 2 younger brothers. Tracy attended Northview High School, excelling in her studies and participating in extracurricular activities as a cheerleader, often with J.B. As the 2 girls began to enter adulthood, they had no idea of the tragic fate that awaited them. On July 31, 1999, J.B. and Tracy set off from Dothan in J.B.'s 1993 Mazda 929 to attend a birthday party in Headland, a town just a few miles north. However, unfamiliar with the roads, the 2 young women soon found themselves in trouble. Just minutes after starting their journey from home, they became lost. At approximately 10:30 p.m., J.B. and Tracy stopped at a BP gas station in Headland to ask for directions. The gas station was located near the intersection of routes 173 and 431. Using the pay phone at the gas station, they called their friends to get a better idea of how to get to the party. However, after driving on, J.B. and Tracy found themselves in Ozark, Alabama, about 24 miles northwest of Headland, instead of their intended destination. Still confused about the directions, the girls stopped at the Big Little store at 11:30 p.m. Although the store was closed, they used the pay phone to make another call. This time, Tracy called her mother to tell them they were lost, in Ozark, and planning to return home. A woman, Marilyn Merritt, and her daughters then stopped at a gas station to buy a soda. Tracy and J.B. approached them and asked for directions to Dothan. Marilyn explained the route as best she could, and the girls seemed to understand. She found the girls polite and well-mannered and noted that their car was clean. Marilyn recalled that the girls left the parking lot and turned right, as she had instructed. However, at that time, J.B. and Tracy had not returned home. The next morning, August 1, 1999, around 8 a.m., Tracy's mother contacted the police to report her daughter missing. Police soon discovered their first clue regarding the girl's disappearance. After Tracy was reported missing, police found J.B.'s car on Herring Avenue in Ozark. What was unusual about the discovery was that the car's gas tank, which had been full the day before, was now nearly empty. The car showed signs of having been driven in muddy conditions, but the doors had been locked, although the driver's side window was partially rolled down. There was no evidence of forced entry. Inside, police found JB's driver's license on the dashboard, as well as the girls' wallets, which still contained cash. However, the car keys were missing, and neither Tracy nor JB were found. A fingerprint on the locked trunk lid led police to believe something was seriously wrong. As they surveyed the scene, they suspected the trunk might contain vital clues but were hampered by the lack of a key. However, after 6 hours of investigation, they found an interior latch that allowed them to open the trunk without a key. When police opened the trunk, they made a horrifying discovery: the bodies of 2 girls inside. Both victims were fully clothed, but their pants were soiled from the waist down. Each had been shot once in the head. An autopsy revealed that Tracy had been shot in the temple, while JB had been shot in the right cheek. Tracy's body also showed a 9mm shell casing in her leg, scratches on her arm, and spikes stuck in her jeans. JB's clothes, especially her new shoes, were muddy and dirty. Police discovered that the 2 girls had likely been shot inside the trunk, although initial signs suggested an execution-style killing. After notifying their families of the discovery, an official murder investigation was launched. Police found the girls' wallets, jewelry, money, and credit cards still in the car, indicating that this was not a robbery. Autopsies revealed no alcohol or drugs in the victims' systems. Additionally, the autopsies confirmed that neither girl had been sexually assaulted before her death, ruling out a sexual motive. 2 months after Tracy and JB's murders, the State Crime Lab released a report revealing the presence of unidentified semen on JB's clothing and skin. Despite this new evidence, the fingerprints found on the trunk lid remained a mystery, as there was no match in the database. With no clear leads, the investigation stalled. As news of the girls' deaths spread rapidly, police still had few leads to identify a suspect. A reward was also offered to try to gather information related to the murders, but no new leads were discovered. However, police soon received an unexpected breakthrough in the case. A month after the discovery of JB and Tracy's bodies, Johnny William Barentine, 28, a longtime resident of Ozark, came forward to the local police department on September 1st. Johnny claimed to have witnessed the girls' murders. He testified that on the night of the murders, he had gone out to buy milk for his 2-year-old son around the time Tracy called from the Big Little Store pay phone. At 1 a.m., Johnny returned home visibly upset and initially told his wife that he had been hit by a black truck near Herring Road. However, during a 4-hour interview with Ozark police, Johnny gave 6 different accounts of what he knew. He initially told Ozark Police Chief Tony R. Spivey that he saw a black truck speeding away from the area where the girls' bodies were discovered. Unfortunately, his story continued to change and contradict throughout the interviews. Johnny initially claimed that he picked up a tattooed stranger and drove to the Big Little Store. He later said that the stranger got into a car with 2 girls, whom he recognized as the 2 girls who were later found dead. Johnny said that the group drove to Herring Avenue, where the stranger forced the girls out of the car, leading to a struggle as the girls tried to escape. According to Johnny's statement, after witnessing a confrontation, he saw something in the stranger's hand just before hearing 2 gunshots. Johnny then drove the stranger away from the scene before returning home. However, in a conflicting version of events, Johnny admitted to police that he actually knew the stranger he picked up, identifying him as a neighbor who lived nearby. Notably, Johnny's home was less than a mile from where police discovered the victims' bodies. Johnny's story was not convincing to police, and he became the prime suspect in the murders of JB and Tracy. As a result, Ozark police quickly arrested him and charged him with 2 counts of attempted murder. However, several issues with his testimony raised suspicions. Notably, Johnny did not mention any sexual activity that would explain the presence of semen on JB's clothes and body. Additionally, the neighbor he accused had a solid alibi for the time. Johnny initially confessed to making up the entire story to collect the reward money. Despite his admission, the police believed they had the right suspect. At a preliminary hearing on September 21, Alabama Bureau of Investigation Special Agent Charles Huggins testified that Johnny accurately described the victim's clothing and other relevant details, indicating that he was indeed present at the crime scene. Then, at a bail hearing on October 18, Johnny gave another testimony. He proclaimed his innocence, saying that he never picked up a man with a tattoo or witnessed anything on the night of the murder. According to Johnny, he went to the store around 11 p.m. to buy milk for his son and then made up the story to get a reward. The judge denied him bail and he was sent back to the Dale County Jail in Ozark. Throughout this time, Johnny's family members remained supportive of him. They gave interviews to the media, expressing their belief in his innocence and stating that he was incapable of harming anyone. Johnny's attorney, Bill Kimmons, argued that his client had no involvement in the murders of Tracy and J.B., emphasizing that the 4-hour interrogation had affected Johnny, who was trapped in his own false confession. Johnny's defense also pointed out that he had only completed 7th grade and part of 8th grade. He said his client was in special education, suggesting he was incapable of planning the heinous crime. After further investigation, it was discovered that Johnny's DNA did not match the semen found on the victim's body and clothing. As a result, he was released from prison on December 17, 1999. In January 2000, a Dale County grand jury chose not to indict Johnny, officially clearing him of any suspects in the murders of Tracy and J.B. This development led to a setback in the investigation, with criticism directed at the police methods used and doubts raised about the Ozark Police's ability to handle the case. However, police continued to focus on other potential suspects. During the investigation, a man from Michigan was identified as the prime suspect. He had attended a party the night of the murders near the area and JB's car was later found. The man had left town shortly after the murders, raising suspicion. Police interviewed him 3 times in Michigan but were unable to provide a clear explanation for the 3 to 4-hour gap in his alibi for the night of the murder. However, these statements were never made public by police. The case against him was eventually dropped after DNA evidence proved his innocence. Another key lead police are investigating is the driver of a small white pickup truck that was spotted at the Big Little store. Security footage captured the truck at the gas station when JB and Tracy stopped to call Tracy's mother from a payphone. The video quality was poor and did not show the driver or anyone getting in or out of the truck. It was impossible to follow a digital trail, as there was no record of gas being purchased at the gas station at the time. After releasing photos of the truck to the media, police asked the public for information, but as leads went cold, the driver and truck were never found. The last potential lead was a Mississippi man who had been extradited to Ozark from Jones County on an unrelated charge of possession of drug paraphernalia. The man had stayed with relatives in Ozark for a short time before leaving town 2 days after the murder, prompting police to question him. However, the questioning yielded no significant information and, without evidence, they were forced to release him. A woman contacted police in March 2000, reporting that she had heard screaming and 2 gunshots on the night of July 31, 1999, near Highway 123 South, just inside the city limits. When asked about her delayed report, she explained that she feared being implicated. Police searched the area thoroughly based on her description and found a 9mm bullet, the same caliber used in the murders of Tracy and J.B. However, the make of the bullet did not match the brand of the shell casing found on Tracy's body. Furthermore, the bullet had no markings that could be used to forensically compare it to other evidence in the case. Unfortunately, this lead ended up being another dead end for the police. Several leads in the J.B. and Tracy case eventually ran into dead ends, but police were determined to find a DNA match. As JB and Tracy's grieving families tried to move on with their lives, the case went cold. Years later, however, a dramatic development reignited the investigation. A major breakthrough came in 2015 when Rena, an auxiliary Ozark police officer, came forward and publicly accused an Ozark police officer of killing JB and Tracy and others of covering up the incident. Rena made several serious allegations related to a 1999 incident in Ozark. According to her, a police officer stopped a man named JB on the night of July 31, 1999, looking for cassette tapes containing recordings of conversations. These tapes allegedly implicated Ozark police officers in a cocaine distribution and profiteering scheme. Rena asserted that the search for the tapes ultimately led to the murders of the two innocent girls. Rena further alleged that several law enforcement officers knew the identity of the killer but chose to cover it up by destroying evidence. They also allegedly threatened her to keep her from speaking out. She specifically named 3 police officers, Gary Butch Whittington, Rex Tipton, and Eddie Henderson, as harassing and threatening her. Rena further accused then-police Chief Tony Spivey, who led the initial investigation, of being involved in the cover-up. However, she did not reveal the identity of the specific police officer she believed was responsible for the murders. Noted American journalist and newspaper editor John B. Carroll wrote an article discussing the case. John B. believes that the officer involved thought that Tracy and JB would use the tapes as evidence in a trial scheduled for August 2, 1999, just 48 hours after they were killed. However, John B. also claims that Rena was severely beaten with a baseball bat after speaking out, which prevented her from naming the real killer. The officers Rena accused all denied any involvement in the murders of JB and Tracy. Without any physical evidence, none of them were ever officially named as suspects in the case. Regardless, the allegations exploded on numerous true crime websites and social media, leading to a defamation lawsuit. On January 29, 2016, Keith Coffin, Rex Tipton, Tony Spivey, Eddie Henderson, and Gary Butch Whittington, all Ozark, Alabama police officers, filed a defamation of character lawsuit against Rena Crum, John B. Carroll, and Dean Matthews. That case was dismissed in 2018. In May 2016, Rena Crum was convicted of molesting JB's sister and was given a suspended sentence and a $250 fine. Over the years, police investigated multiple theories, interviewed hundreds of people, and took DNA samples from several suspects, but to no avail. It took 20 years and the advancement of new DNA technology before police were able to make an arrest. In March 2019, police sent DNA found on JB's body and clothing to Virginia-based Parabon Nano Laboratories, which specializes in DNA. Using a public genealogical database to analyze the suspect's DNA and match it to genetic information led police to a breakthrough in the case. The new evidence linked DNA found at the crime scene to a suspect named Coley McCraney, a man in his 40s. At the time, Coley was not a suspect in the 1999 murders of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hollett, but the discovery changed everything. Coley, an Alabama native, had led a relatively normal life before his DNA linked him to the crimes. Born in Alabama, Coley attended and graduated from Carroll High School in Ozark in 1992, where he was an accomplished athlete and served as president of the school's library club. After completing high school, he enlisted in the United States Air Force and served from 1993 to 1997. Coley's personal life involved several marriages. He married his first wife in 1992 but separated 2 years later and eventually divorced. During this time, his ex-wife accused him of assault and filed a complaint with the Air Force. After the divorce, Coley remarried in 2001 and started a family with his second wife. With the exception of a child support issue in 1998, Coley has no prior criminal record or criminal history. Coley spent 20 years as a truck driver for various companies in Alabama. In addition to his trucking career, he recently co-founded a church and served as a bishop. At the time of the murders, Coley was 26 years old and lived on Lisenby Drive in Ozark, about a mile from where J.B. and Tracy's bodies were discovered in 1999. 20 years after the murders, Coley was arrested on March 19, 2019, following a traffic stop in Daleville, Alabama. During an interview with police, Coley claimed that he did not know J.B. and Tracy. Police did not provide any information about his possible motive. Coley's arrest took the Ozark community by surprise, especially Police Chief Marlon Walker, who attended school with him. Rena Crum, 53, who previously accused the Ozark Police Department of covering up the killings, withdrew her charges at a hearing in August 2022. Coley McCraney, 49, is facing 5 counts of attempted murder for the shooting deaths of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hollett and is being held without bail in the Dale County Jail ahead of his trial, which is scheduled for April 17, 2023. At trial, Coley admitted that he knew J.B. He had a conversation with J.B. several weeks before the killings in which she introduced herself as Jennifer at the Wiregrass Commons Mall. He testified that on the day of the killings, he and J.B. had consensual sex in his truck. He said he never knew that Jennifer was J.B. Beasley. On April 26, 2023, a jury found Coley McCraney guilty on all charges and sentenced him to life in prison without parole. In July 2023, a Dale County District Court judge denied Coley's request for a new trial. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Rachel McLean. Rachel McLean returned home to Blackpool, UK, for the summer of 1990. She was 18 years old and had just finished her first year at Oxford. Rachel was very busy with her studies and spent all her free time studying. She had a healthy lifestyle and played sports. Rachel had many friends and loved heavy metal music. She joined a local charity, where she worked during the summer. While on a day off, Rachel was relaxing with friends at a local club when she met a bartender named John Turner, who had long brown hair. John was from Nottingham and had returned to Blackpool for the summer. Rachel found him attractive and easy to talk to, so they quickly became interested in each other. That night, they chatted. John attended Rachel's 19th birthday party. After the party, they had a passionate night together. According to John, their relationship continued to develop. However, at the end of the summer, Rachel had to return to Oxford, and John returned to Nottingham. The two cities were just over 2 hours' drive apart, so they could easily visit each other. They spent weekends together and kept in touch by letter and phone during the week. John wrote Rachel long love letters, which she enjoyed. John Turner was born in HMP, but as a child he moved to New Zealand with his parents and settled in a city called Bath. The family lived in 2 countries before John returned to the UK to study at King's College. During his time there, he won the hearts of both students and teachers. He hosted a show on the local college radio station twice a week and was a talented athlete on the soccer team. Rachel McLean was a promising student. Her literature teacher at college admired her achievements. Rachel started college in the same year as John. On Christmas, Rachel invited John to meet her parents and they had a nice evening together. Rachel's parents were very happy with her choice, finding John intelligent, good-looking and confident. John became increasingly infatuated with Rachel but was saddened by the distance between them. During this time, she moved into a student apartment on the first floor of the school with 4 other students. John felt anxious and jealous because one of her neighbors was a man and the boys often visited her house. To cope, he wrote and called her constantly. However, Rachel was very busy with work and study. Since there were no mobile phones in those days, they could only communicate by landline. She would often come home at the end of the evening, exhausted, and go straight to bed. She did not have the opportunity to communicate with John regularly. His dissatisfaction increased with each missed call and he became increasingly jealous. His possessiveness became evident during this time and he complained to her, which began to annoy Rachel. On February 11th, she sent him a Valentine's card, calling him the only love of her life. However, around that time, she wrote in her diary about her lover in very unflattering terms. It seemed that she had doubts about whether John was the person she could spend the rest of her life with. On Valentine's Day, John proposed to her, but she unexpectedly refused, which shocked him. She explained that she was not ready. John said that he understood and would wait. They continued their relationship, calling each other occasionally and rarely seeing each other. 2 months later, in April, they planned to spend the Easter holidays together. John went to Blackpool again on Saturday, and Rachel's mother took her back to Oxford because she had important school matters to attend to on Sunday. They planned to have a quiet day together at her student flat, as it was their last weekend before Rachel's exams. Rachel spent a lot of time preparing for her exams. While she was studying, her boyfriend was watching football in the living room because he was a Nottingham fan. That weekend, the team played in the FA Cup semi-finals, so the next day John got on the train and returned to Nottingham. There was no one in the student flat all week because the young people had gone home for the holidays. Everyone wanted to spend time with their loved ones because they wouldn't have the chance until the end of the year. By Monday, her roommates began to return, eager to see Rachel and hear about her weekend. However, Rachel was missing. Her room was empty, the windows were open, but nothing else seemed out of the ordinary. The students assumed she was busy with other activities. On Wednesday, her boyfriend, John, tried to call her, but she did not answer. They had planned to stay in touch, but Rachel did not return his calls. John assumed that she was busy and did not want to bother her. However, after 2 days of silence, which was unusual since their relationship had only recently improved, John began to worry. He called again, but still received no response. The next day, he tried again, but was unsuccessful. There was no social media at the time, so John left a message on her answering machine. But she remained silent. He also sent her a letter by regular mail, which he sent as soon as he got home. The letter arrived in New Mexico on Thursday, and John thanked Rachel for a wonderful weekend and wished her luck with her exams. On April 19, 1991, 19-year-old Rachel failed to show up for her exam, which was especially worrying because she had been studying hard and the exam was extremely important to her. When the exam proctors tried to contact her, they were unsuccessful. Her parents also had no idea where she was, prompting them to report her missing to the police. The Oxford police were initially skeptical. They received dozens of missing student reports each month because parents went to the police station after parties. In 99% of cases, teens sobered up from drinking and returned to school within 24 hours. But that was not the case. This diligent student had been missing for days and had not been heard from at all. None of her friends knew where she was, so the police became interested in what had happened. They immediately went to the apartment where Rachel had gone missing. Detective Susie Krug was looking for information about the students who had been in the same room as Rachel. Victoria Clare, Margaret Smith, Sarah Hume, and John Forby. The friends immediately pointed to Rachel's boyfriend, who was annoying everyone with his jealousy. They showed a letter he had sent from Nottingham around the time Rachel went missing. The neighbors also confirmed that John Turner was the last person Rachel had been in contact with. The room they checked showed no signs of forced entry, robbery, struggle, or blood. Everything was in its place. The police found Rachel's diary, which might contain important clues. The police began to study the contents of the diary. They knew that John was possessive and jealous of his girlfriend, wanting to know her whereabouts and presence at all times. This behavior gradually began to annoy Rachel. Their conflicts often arose over this issue. On April 22, police met with John Turner, 22. During the conversation, John expressed concern about his missing girlfriend. He was asked to describe his activities during the time Rachel went missing. John mentioned that they had a great weekend together and that everything was fine before they broke up. He said that he woke up early, showered, and that they had sex in the afternoon. After lunch, they went to Oxford Station together at around 4:15 p.m., taking a bus. They had a few hours before their train arrived, and while waiting, they bumped into a friend of Rachel's at around 5 p.m. The three of them went to a local coffee shop and had coffee. Rachel's friend was described as a dark-skinned man with long hair, wearing ripped jeans and a black jacket. He was similar in appearance to John, except for his dark skin. John admitted that he could not remember the man's name because they had just met and he did not expect to become friends with him. According to John, the man offered to drive Rachel home in his car. She agreed, and then John and Rachel said goodbye. John returned to Nottingham, while Rachel went with her friend to her apartment. However, John's story about the man was very suspicious. The police suspected that John was lying, and he quickly became the prime suspect in Rachel's disappearance, as she had been missing for a long time, leading to concerns that she might be dead or imprisoned. Urgent action was needed. First, it was important to learn more about the prime suspect, as he was the last known person to have had contact with Rachel, and his story about a black man needed further investigation. Rachel's disappearance left everyone baffled because none of her roommates or friends remembered her having such a friend. In order to gather more witnesses, the police shared information about the case. From the beginning, there was no reason to think that she had run away. The police first checked this possibility by talking to Rachel's family and friends. Rachel had no problems with her loved ones, friends, studies, or personal life. She was eagerly preparing for exams, which made it impossible for her to not attend. Rachel never complained about any problems, nor did she suffer from drug addiction or mental problems. People like her usually do not run away, and all of her belongings were left untouched. This allowed the police to rule out the possibility that she had run away on purpose. The police were skeptical of John's testimony and assigned a police officer to approach him and gain his trust. The officer's job was to observe John's reactions and behavior while updating him on the investigation. From the beginning, the officer suspected John of lying to them, noticing that he became nervous when talking about Rachel, despite his attempts to hide it. Despite these suspicions, a week of surveillance did not reveal any useful information to help the case. Meanwhile, the police were searching the neighborhood for witnesses, K9 units were working with dogs, and divers were examining local waters. Several people remembered seeing John, but no one could confirm that he had left the house with Rachel. In addition, he had not been behaving suspiciously, so this witness's testimony did not add anything to the search. During this time, John continued to cooperate with the investigation. He even helped create a composite sketch of the man who, according to him, was supposed to drive Rachel back to her apartment. John believes this friend was responsible for her abduction. It has now been 2 weeks and police believe she is no longer alive. No ransom demands have been made, ruling out kidnapping as a motive. Search teams, including police, rescue workers, and volunteers, have scoured a large area around Oxford, including drains and boating holes, but their efforts have been in vain. The police examined Rachel's diary and discovered her true feelings for John, a disturbing mix of hatred and pity. She expressed that she was unable to confront him directly or leave because she was afraid. Rachel had no genuine feelings for John, and her Valentine's Day gestures were more like a duty than a genuine expression of love. She knew that John was unstable and prone to losing control when angry. Afraid to face this reality, she admitted that their closeness was harmful and needed to end. In stark contrast, John described their relationship as happy, often emphasizing their frequent sexual activity during interrogations. Meanwhile, Rachel wrote of her disgust for him but felt powerless to stop their closeness. The police believe he may have killed her after reading her diary and discovering her true feelings, but more evidence is needed to prove his guilt. John has been actively cooperating with the investigation. He has attended a press conference to draw public attention to the search for Rachel and to help reconstruct the last day he spent with her. John describes the events at the station, claiming that a stranger, whom he says was a dark-skinned friend of Rachel's, was involved in her disappearance. The plan is to closely monitor John's reactions and behavior during these events, as experienced journalists can identify inconsistencies in his story. Many people have noted that John's description of the dark-skinned guy closely matches his appearance, including his clothing, except for his skin color. It is as if he was trying to describe himself but changing his race. In addition, the public took note of John's strange reactions when asked if he thought Rachel was still alive. He vaguely stated, in his heart, he wanted to think so, which further aroused suspicion among the conference attendees. Throughout the conversation, the guy's smile never seemed to disappear. This event greatly promoted the investigation into Rachel's disappearance. Several random witnesses who were watching the press conference on television clearly remembered the events of the day the girl disappeared at the train station. They contacted the police, saying that only John was at the cafe at the station, there was no girl or anyone else with him. Among the witnesses was a man sitting at the next table. He noticed that John seemed very nervous while drinking coffee, constantly looking around and startled. According to this witness, at one point, John took out a piece of paper and started writing. Perhaps Rachel was no longer alive at that time, and John began writing the same letter he had sent immediately after arriving in Notting. All this was done to create an alibi for himself. It has been established that John and Rachel went to the station together by bus, although there were no cameras there at that time. However, during that time in the city, all passengers who boarded the bus and paid for their tickets were monitored by special electronic devices. It was impossible to ride without paying. When checked, it was discovered that Rachel had not paid for the trip, which showed that she was not with John and could not have been there that day. Therefore, John lied. The reason for his lie remains unclear, and it is still unknown where Rachel's body could be. Police suspected that her remains might still be in the student apartment or somewhere on campus. Surveillance cameras covered the area around the building, but none of them showed John carrying any large, suspicious items. Police requested a floor plan of the student dormitory and discovered that there were voids under the floorboards. Police returned to the apartment where Rachel had lived and removed the floorboards. There, they found her body tightly packed in a bag, only 20 centimeters high. The cold weather at the time slowed the body's decomposition. In addition, the space between floors was structurally well ventilated, so the decomposing body did not emit a foul odor and was not discovered until 19 days after her death. Because Rachel's body was so well preserved, the forensic expert was able to determine the circumstances of her death with a high degree of accuracy within an hour. John was then questioned by the police. Initially, he refused to answer police questions. However, the next day, he confessed to killing Rachel. He said that after watching a football match, he proposed to Rachel, hoping that she would accept, but she refused. The couple exchanged a few words. As a result, he lost his temper and attacked her. In his confession, John admitted that he did not understand why she refused to get engaged. She did not want to answer for a long time but finally admitted that she had been having an affair and that she was not sure that she was ready to commit her life to John. In response, he insulted her. Rachel tried to hit him, and after the slap, he lost control and pinned her down on the chair with his weight, preventing her from moving. John claimed that he did not remember what happened next. When he regained consciousness, he found himself sitting on a couch in front of Rachel's lifeless body. Forensic experts confirmed that Rachel had been strangled. There was a deep, thin mark on her neck, indicating the use of an object rather than hands. The tie Rachel had given him for Christmas was missing from the crime scene and from John's belongings, believed to have been used to kill her. After a while, he decided to dispose of the body. Unable to get the body out of the building, he put it in a bag, removed the floorboards from Rachel's room, and stuffed the body into a small space. He then quietly reinstalled the floorboards. John then packed his things and headed to the bus station. While waiting for the train at a coffee shop, he wrote a letter to Rachel. In the letter, he thanked her for the weekend they spent together and mentioned a black man who was supposed to drive her home, which was a made-up story. He had invented this character to support the lie he had created. He also expressed concern for his girlfriend, who would be alone for several days. After sending the letter, he called her several times and left messages on her answering machine. John then wrote another letter, addressed to Rachel in New Mexico, saying that he had tried to call her several times during the week and was very worried, hoping she would call back soon. This deception allowed him to fool the police and the public for 19 days. Afterward, despite his confession, John Turner maintained his innocence. In December 1991, John claimed that his actions were in self-defense. He wanted to avoid a life sentence for premeditated murder, so he argued that the girl's death was accidental. Rachel was described as argumentative and unfaithful, often insulting John. John also stressed the humiliation he suffered at the hands of Rachel. He had erectile dysfunction due to the disease and claimed that she constantly criticized him for it. This was especially difficult during the outbreak when he was unable to have sex with her due to pain in his groin and abdomen. In court, his lawyer portrayed him as the victim. He was a caring man in love, dreamed of marrying Rachel and proposed to her twice, both times being rejected. Of course, all of this is not true, because judging by the diary entries, the girl was generally uncomfortable with intimate contact with John. There is no evidence that Rachel had any intrigue or relationship with anyone else. Rachel's close friends did not know about any other guy. Many believe that she made up the story of the affair to justify her quick breakup with John, but it is possible that she never actually said this, it was just his word. In the end, the jury did not believe John and he was sentenced to life in prison, with the right to parole. John's story does not end there. While serving his sentence, he developed a relationship with a 20-year-old woman who looked exactly like Rachel. She learned about him through a newspaper article and became interested, believing that he had been wrongly convicted. Despite being imprisoned, they began a romantic relationship. Lawyers continued to fight for John's release and maintained his innocence. In 2003, after 11 years behind bars, John was paroled. He returned to New Zealand, intending to start his life over. His girlfriend, whom he met while in prison, followed him to New Zealand to attend university in Whanganui, the city where John lived. Apparently, 11 years in prison did not benefit John because he then attacked and began strangling the new girl, who believed he was innocent. John was 49 at the time. Fortunately, the attack was not serious and the girl was able to escape without serious injury. According to several witnesses and victims, John had lost control of his temper several times in the 6 months leading up to the incident. It was clear that he had anger management issues. John often became jealous and turned small problems into big arguments, often insulting his partner in front of others. Some time after the initial incident, the situation recurred and he attacked her again. During this time, the couple were staying at a motel in the city of Wanganui. There, they argued again. John threw his girlfriend onto the bed, raised his fists and punched her in the face while holding her down with his weight. However, he regained his composure and left the room. A few hours later, the girl texted John, saying that she was ending the relationship. She said that he was dangerous and needed to attend an anger management program. In response, he flew into a rage again, returned to the motel and stormed into the room. He attacked her, tore her clothes off, demanded sex, hit her on the head several times and threatened to kill her. In 2018, the girl reported John to the police and he was charged with assault. He was sentenced to 2 years and 9 months in prison. The sentence was relatively light because the conviction occurred in New Zealand. If the attack had happened in the UK, he would have faced a life sentence. Despite the attack, his new girlfriend told the media that she believes anger management is still an issue for John and that he needs help. She hopes he can control his anger and that they can rekindle their relationship, despite the mental and physical abuse he has inflicted on her. In court, she admitted that he had threatened to kill her if she tried to leave him, although she did not take the threat seriously. John has recently been released from prison, but his current situation is unknown. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Hannah Hill. Hannah Hill was an 18-year-old girl from Akron, Ohio, born on May 8, 1981. She had a brother named Justin. By the time she turned 18, she had graduated high school and was ready to begin her adult life. Hannah started searching for a job and secured a part-time position as a secretary. After summer, she planned to attend college. With her job, she was able to save money to buy a car. Hannah was beautiful and well-liked in high school. She had many friends and maintained close relationships with them. Hannah had a 19-year-old boyfriend named Brad. They lived together for a while, but their relationship became troubled, leading Hannah to move back in with her parents. A friend later informed Hannah's parents that the couple frequently argued, and these disputes usually ended with Brad hurling insults. When that didn't work, he sometimes resorted to physical force to assert his viewpoint. Despite these issues and her move back home, their romance continued. Friends advised Hannah to end the relationship, believing Brad was not right for her. However, Hannah finds herself attracted to him, as he is her type. On May 19, 1999, Hannah came home from work in the afternoon, as she usually did. After having dinner, taking a bath, and changing into her pajamas, she settled down to watch a movie. Hannah had no plans to go out that evening. However, while she was getting ready for bed, her friend Jennifer called. They talked for a while, and then Hannah unexpectedly decided to change her plans. Around 10 p.m., she changed her clothes and left the house. She told her mother she was going out for business and appeared worried as she hurried away. Her parents didn't have time to ask her questions or understand what was happening. Although they noticed that the phone call seemed to upset her, they weren't overly concerned since Hannah was an adult and often spent nights with her boyfriend or friends. They had no idea that this was the last time they would see their daughter alive. When the parents woke up in the morning, they noticed that their daughter had not returned home at the expected time. This was not unusual, as Hannah sometimes slept over at her boyfriend's house or stayed out late with friends. At first, they were not worried. However, they then received a call from her company, informing them that Hannah had not come to work. This worried them, as it was unusual for her to be absent from work, considering how seriously she took her job. The parents began texting Hannah, but she did not respond. They continued to wait throughout the evening, still unable to find out where she was. They began to worry about her safety. After calling Hannah's friends and boyfriend, but no one had seen her, her parents contacted the police to report her missing. They gave a description of Hannah and mentioned that her car was also missing, suggesting that she had driven away. Despite this, the police did not launch an investigation. They believed that Hannah was just having fun and would come back on her own, so they postponed the case. This time, Hannah's parents sensed something was really wrong. Hannah seemed to have disappeared without a trace and had not contacted anyone. Realizing that the police were not prioritizing the investigation, they decided to take matters into their own hands. First, they contacted Hannah's boyfriend, but he, like everyone else, had no idea where she was. He said he had tried to contact her, but she had not responded to his messages. Next, the parents started asking Hannah's friends for information. They spoke to Denny, but he also said he had been unable to contact Hannah despite repeated attempts. 2 days later, passers-by reported the abandoned car they had found on the side of the road to the police. The car was found just a few miles from Hannah's home. Witnesses noted that the car looked suspicious because it appeared to have been unused for more than 2 days. Unfortunately, the police did not take Hannah's parents' report seriously. As a result, other police were unaware that the car's owner was missing and were unable to connect the 1996 Geoprism Hannah was driving to the witness reports. As a result, one of the patrol officers was dispatched to the location to simply write a parking ticket, and he took no further action. The next day, Brad contacted the police station where the report was filed. He was angry that the police had not begun an investigation or search for Hannah. He insisted that they take immediate action. After speaking with him, the police reviewed Hannah's parents' missing person report and decided it was time to start looking for her. They also noticed scratches on her boyfriend's body and asked about them. He explained that they had argued shortly before her disappearance due to his infidelity, and during the fight Hannah had attacked him. Although the injuries did not appear to be serious, they raised some suspicions among the police. However, no evidence linking him to Hannah's disappearance was found and he left the police station without incident. His visit helped to advance the investigation and details of Hannah's disappearance were shared with the media. Police hope to find witnesses who can provide further information. Some information about Hannah has emerged. Someone contacted the police after seeing Hannah's car, which was the same car that a patrol officer had been sent to ticket a short time earlier. By May 26th, the car had been parked on the side of the road for a week without anyone coming to pick it up or reporting it. That day, several officers were sent to check on the car. They arrived at the location at 7:30 a.m. The car showed no signs of forced entry or theft. When the officers opened the trunk, they made a horrifying discovery. Hannah's body was inside. This was reported on the news the same day. The body was in a state of decomposition after being in the trunk of a car for a week in hot weather. Hannah was found with her bra pulled around her neck. Her knees were bent and spread, leading police to suspect a sexual motive behind the crime. Hannah had bruises, scratches, and cuts, indicating that she had fought back. Her pager and car keys were found next to her body. Many local residents were outraged that the police did not take her parents' missing person report seriously and did not list her and her car as missing. Hannah remained in the trunk of her car for a week. When a patrol officer arrived to issue a ticket, he did not inspect the car or contact the owner. Many speculate that Hannah may have been alive and the first police arrived and may have been rescued. Even if she had not, the investigation would have begun much sooner, and the passing of a week would have risked losing crucial evidence. Forensic experts conducted an autopsy and determined that Hannah's cause of death was strangulation. They discovered that she had been gagged, found a white substance on her lips, and noted a bite mark on one of her hands. Her body was covered in bruises and abrasions. Additionally, it was established that she had had an intimate encounter with a man shortly before her death. Forensic experts suspected that she may have been raped based on the positioning of her body, her torn clothes, and the nature of her injuries. It appeared that she had resisted and was strangled before being placed in the trunk. A toxicology report revealed a small amount of alcohol in her system, despite her leaving home completely sober, suggesting she had consumed alcohol elsewhere. Police initially considered Brad the prime suspect because intimate partners were often involved in such cases. When he arrived at the station, they noticed suspicious scratches on his body. Hannah's parents also suspect him of being involved in her disappearance, as they never liked him. During a search of Hannah's home, police found her diary, which detailed her relationship with her boyfriend. They learned that he had been both emotionally and physically abusive towards her, which was confirmed by her diary entries and several witness accounts. The police brought Brad in for questioning. He claimed to have an alibi for the night of her disappearance, stating he was at a party with friends, where they watched TV and drank. Although his alibi was shaky, he passed a polygraph test. Police found him to be genuinely upset and concerned about Hannah, and his body language suggested he was being truthful. The police obtained a recording of Hannah's phone calls that night. They discovered that she had made 4 calls from her home phone. 1 call was to her friend, 2 calls were to Brad, and another call was to a guy named Denny Ross, who was a friend of her boyfriend, Brad. The police then checked Hannah's pager. They discovered that on the night of her disappearance, she had sent several messages to her friends, including Denny, who was mentioned in her diary. Recently, they had become closer and often talked to each other. However, Hannah's friend insisted that their relationship was not romantic. They became friends mainly because Denny's house was a popular spot for parties, as he lived alone without his parents, allowing people to enjoy themselves freely. Their interactions were purely friendly. The police began to view Denny, Hannah's friend, as a suspect in her murder since he might have been the last person to see her alive. Friends described Denny as potentially aggressive, stating that he always got what he wanted and could behave rudely. Police discovered that Denny had a legal problem 2 weeks before Hannah went missing. He had been arrested while selling illegal drugs for $500. Denny quickly admitted to drug possession and trafficking charges. On May 26, he received a suspended sentence for his drug trafficking charges. Police went to Denny's home to question him and investigate his possible involvement in Hannah's disappearance and murder. When police arrived, they found Denny wearing a cast on his arm. Surprisingly, he was on the phone and told police he was talking to a lawyer. Denny claimed that he had injured his hand in a fight a few weeks earlier. When speaking to the police, he mentioned that Hannah had called him around 11 p.m. on the night she went missing. He also provided a significant amount of new information that he had not disclosed in previous interviews related to the case. The police found this disturbing, so he was taken to the police station for further questioning. At the station, Denny said that night, he and Hannah talked for a long time about her boyfriend. She arrived feeling upset and unhappy in her relationship, expressing her frustrations and appearing ready to end it. After their lengthy conversation, they shared a kiss, and then she left around 1:30 a.m. He claimed he never saw her again and insisted she was completely sober. They didn't drink that night. Denny believed Hannah had feelings for him, and he was also in love with her. It was unusual for a man who was in love and possibly Hannah's new boyfriend to choose not to help find her when he had the chance. This raised suspicions, prompting police to quickly obtain a search warrant for Denny's home. On the morning of May 27th, 15 police officers arrived at Denny's second-floor apartment. They found several small bloodstains that he could not explain, which was very concerning. Blood samples were sent to the lab for analysis. Outside, under a bush, they found a trash bag. One officer noticed what appeared to be a woman's shoe inside. When the officers opened the bag, they found women's pants, underwear, and shoes, all of which were stained with blood. It was confirmed that these items belonged to Hannah and had her blood on them. One of the police officers reported hearing a noise outside the window while he was going up the stairs. At that moment, Denny reportedly threw the evidence bag onto the street. Denny was later arrested. However, he maintained his innocence. His father hired the city's top lawyers to defend him in court. The defense team carefully reviewed the case file and the evidence gathered during the investigation. By this time, a collection of evidence had been compiled. Along with Hannah's DNA, traces of Denny were found in a garbage bag. The white residue on the Hannah's lips contained his DNA, and a bite mark on her neck matched Denny's dental impressions. Male bodily fluid was found on the Hannah, but after being there for a week, it was no longer suitable for analysis. Police believed that Denny not only killed her but also attacked, forced, and raped her. The defense argued that Denny's DNA found on Hannah's lips and the bite mark did not prove that he had killed her. It only showed that they had intimate contact. Furthermore, the defense emphasized that the police mishandled the initial investigation, leading to a lengthy delay in locating Hannah's disappearance. Instead of finding her within hours of her parents reporting the incident, it took police a week. To cover up their negligence, the attorneys argued the police tried to charge the first person they encountered. The attorneys noted that the police did not interview enough potential witnesses and did not look for other suspects, focusing only on Denny. The attorneys said that several bags of fast food were found in Hannah's car and that Hannah had stopped at a fast food restaurant shortly before her death. However, the police did not go to the restaurant to interview the staff. It is possible that Hannah encountered a dangerous person during her trip to the restaurant, leading to the attack and subsequent death. The defense argued that the blood found at Denny's house did not belong to Hannah, and that it was unreasonable to think that Denny with a broken arm could have raped and murdered a girl in his own home, since he could not have overpowered her with such an injury, especially given the complete lack of DNA evidence linking him to the victim's car and the evidence bag. The attorney argued that someone had intentionally framed Denny. The police have a different opinion. When police arrived at Denny's home, he allegedly threw an evidence bag out the window. However, Denny maintained that he did not throw the bag out the window. There were no fingerprints on the bag, and it did not match any trash bags he had at home. Police also did not test the temperature of the bag, making it impossible to determine whether it had been outside for minutes or hours. Meanwhile, Hannah Hill was buried in a family plot in Kentucky the day after her 19th birthday. The trial of Denny Ross began on October 17, 2000. Hannah's friend, Jennifer Edwards, was the first to testify. She described Denny as an unreliable person who could be aggressive and physically violent. Jennifer said that after Hannah disappeared, she visited him. But he claimed that he had not seen Hannah before she disappeared, although in fact, they had met, which meant that he was hiding something. The lawyers argued that the bag had been placed under Denny's house by the real criminal. They stressed that Denny had no motive to kill Hannah. They were not romantically involved, they simply liked each other and had a future together. So why would he kill Hannah, the person he loved, and give up the chance to be with her? The defense argued that the Brad, who was extremely jealous and had previously been violent towards Hannah, might have been driven by jealousy towards Denny, leading him to kill his partner. The defense also pointed to scratches on the Brad's body that he had when he arrived at the police station. He admitted that Hannah had caused the scratches but claimed they occurred before her disappearance. However, this could have been a lie. The police's failure to investigate his statement thoroughly and the prolonged search for Hannah's body could result in significant penalties for police due to negligence. Thus, the defense believed the police were eager to close the case quickly to avoid facing serious consequences. Forensic experts had compelling evidence that the girl had been intimate before her death but were unable to prove this due to the state of decomposition. By the time the body was discovered, it was already quite badly decomposed, making it difficult to draw conclusions. However, the prosecution claimed that the nature of the injuries found on Hannah's body, her position, and the state of her clothing suggested that she had been brutally raped. A chemist analyzed the white substance found on Hannah's lips. The results showed that it was a common compound that could not be definitively linked to Denny. The expert noted that the same material was used in many different products. Therefore, it was impossible to determine with certainty that Denny was involved in the white substance on her lips. Meanwhile, the defense team has been working hard to prevent rape charges against Denny Ross, because under state law, he could face the death penalty for both murder and rape. At the time, the jury found the evidence bag near Denny's house suspicious. They struggled to understand why Denny would have kept the victim's clothes there for a week. Furthermore, if someone threw the open bag from the second floor, there was a chance that the contents would fall out. Instead, the bag lay neatly, as if it had been placed there intentionally to attract the attention of the police. As the jury deliberated their verdict, they discovered that a juror had reviewed documents related to Hannah prior to the trial. By law, jurors are not allowed to have third-party information in advance because it could create bias and influence their opinions. As a result, the trial was deemed invalid and a new jury had to be held. However, because the documents declaring Denny Ross innocent of rape had already been signed, he could not be indicted again for the same crime. As a result, the jury was discharged and Denny was granted a temporary release. After a year of probation, the main suspect was sentenced to 25 years in prison after he attacked with a knife and raped another girl, 32-year-old Jennifer. He beat her severely, breaking her collarbone and jaw. The girl pretended to be dead so that he would leave. She immediately contacted the police afterward. It is unknown whether he would have killed her if he had noticed signs of life. Investigators thought that she was very lucky, as Jennifer bore a strong resemblance to the deceased Hannah. Following this, the discussion of the murder of Hannah Hill resumed with renewed vigor. Despite the fact that a man could not be tried twice for the same crime of rape, he could be tried for murder. Therefore, a new trial took place. The only thing he could not be sentenced to was death in court. In addition to the old evidence and witnesses, new ones were discussed. In particular, ex-girlfriends of Dennis spoke, claiming that he inclined them to intimate relations and used violence. Mutual friends of Dennis and Hannah testified that the defendant was obsessed with the deceased and, after the discovery of her body, he boasted that he had slept with her and even strangled her. During the retrial, the prosecution's case was much stronger. DNA testing had advanced significantly since Hannah's death, allowing experts to detect Dennis's DNA in drops of blood on Hannah's trousers and underwear. Dennis's DNA was also found under the fingernails on Hannah's left hand and on the deceased's t-shirt. A witness was found who saw Dennis throwing something out of the window of his apartment. When police discovered the bag with the victim's clothes outside, this witness also stated that she heard screams from Dennis Ross's house on the night of her disappearance and was sure that he was the one who raped and killed the girl. The witness even listened to a phone conversation in which they were discussing Hannah. The state appealed and that decision was overturned. Denny could have faced a retrial and he returned to court in 2012 to face murder charges. The trial also mentioned his attack on Jennifer, who survived and survived. Jennifer said that they met at a bar, had a few beers, and she invited him to her house with friends. However, when they returned, Jennifer began to feel unwell and asked everyone to leave. Everyone left, except Denny, who went upstairs to use the bathroom. After a while, Jennifer went looking for Denny. When she found him, he attacked her, stabbed her in the face and dragged her down the stairs. He hit her with such force that he broke her jaw and collarbone. Denny threatened to kill her children if she tried to escape. When Jennifer tried to run away, he choked her from behind. He raped her while holding a knife and continued to choke her. Jennifer was shocked when she couldn't breathe and passed out several times. She pretended to be dead, at which point Denny released her but showed no concern for her condition. Denny eventually kicked her several times, but she remained still, and he eventually left. She then called 911. Jennifer spent 6 months recovering in the hospital. In response to his testimony, Denny claimed it was a lie and insisted that they had consensual sex. When asked about Jennifer's injuries, he suggested that she must have fallen or been attacked by someone else, denying any involvement. Denny's father, Alan, defended his son during the trial. He explained that he was at Denny's house when Hannah arrived that night. She was crying and depressed after an argument with her boyfriend. Hannah needed Denny's support, and they talked to each other instead of going out. By the end of the night, she had made it out safely. Alan believed that Hannah may have been attacked outside, but he insisted that it was not his son who hurt her. The prosecution presented a different version of events, claiming that Hannah, upset over an argument with her boyfriend, went to Denny for comfort because she trusted him. They alleged that Denny took advantage of her vulnerability and began harassing her, but she refused. The prosecution raised doubts about Alan's presence in the house, noting that Denny lived alone. With the new evidence, the jury concluded that there was enough evidence to convict him. As a result, Denny Ross was convicted of murder and tampering with evidence. 13 years after Hannah Hill's death, Denny was sentenced to life in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 19 years, when he will be 67 years old. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Assunta Botera. Rosario Porto and her husband, Alfonso Botera, were wealthy individuals. Rosario's father served as an influential French consul, and her mother was an art teacher. Rosario followed in his father's footsteps. She became a successful lawyer. In 1997, she was appointed French consul. She inherited this post from her father. Alfonso was a well-known journalist. He and Rosario married in 1996 and they moved to a large apartment in an upscale area of Santiago de Compostela, Spain. Rosario had lupus erythematosus, which led doctors to advise against pregnancy. They decided to adopt a child abandoned by his parents and create a loving home for him. Adoption was challenging in Spain, so when they were in their early 30s, they chose to go to China for adoption. After navigating numerous bureaucratic hurdles, they arrived at an orphanage. Rosario immediately noticed a 9-month-old girl, and within 2 weeks, they resolved all issues to officially adopt her. When returning to Spain, the child's documents named her Assunta Fagnan. This was notable since Assunta was among the first Chinese children adopted in the area. Initially, it seemed fortunate for her to join a respected and wealthy family, but unfortunately, this joy did not last long. Assunta was a highly capable girl. She excelled academically, studied multiple languages, practiced ballet, and attended music school. It seems that Rosario and Alfonso want to give her every opportunity to develop. On July 4, 2013, Rosario and her 12-year-old daughter, Assunta, went to the beach to cool off on a hot day. Assunta told a terrifying story about a man wearing a black mask and gloves who tried to strangle her the night before. The longer the girl talked, the more she lost control, and finally, her mother cried. She knew about it, she was there when it happened, but for some reason she did not contact the police. On the night of September 21st, 2013, at 10:30 p.m., Rosario and Alfonso were at the police station for another reason. They reported their daughter, Assunta, was missing for several hours. Then, Rosario recounted Assunta's story of the attempted attack from 2.5 months prior. This left them fearful that the attacker had returned and something terrible might have happened to their daughter. They were terrified she had been kidnapped. Alfonso was convinced she was no longer alive. They urgently pleaded with the police to take immediate action. In the early hours of September 22nd, two men were driving through a forest on their way back from a bar. Suddenly, the driver stopped, saying he noticed something unusual in the forest. He didn't understand what was going on, so he turned his headlights toward the forest and mentioned to his friend that he felt like someone was watching them. Despite this, he wasn't scared, likely due to the alcohol he had consumed, so he got out of the car and walked a few steps into the forest. In the light of the car's headlights, he saw something on the ground that looked like a doll. As he approached, he realized it was a girl. She was tied up, and her clothes were dirty. He checked for a pulse and found that the girl was dead. Then, they quickly contacted the police. The police identified the body as Assunta, who had died just a week before her 13th birthday. While examining the area near her body, they discovered her mobile phone, which contained some disturbing photographs. There are several photos of she wrapped tightly, lying with her eyes wide open. Some forensic experts suggested her dilated pupils indicated possible drug use. Even more distressing were photos of the girl in revealing clothing, with bright makeup, fishnet stockings, and posing provocatively on a couch. Her eyes remained wide open, and her pupils were dilated. These photos later appeared on the internet, were widely circulated and making people angry about how a child was treated like that. Assunta's last day was described by her parents as ordinary. However, then little girl suddenly went missing and was found dead a few hours after they reported her disappearance. On that day, the girl went to visit her father, Alfonso, at his work, and then hurried back home, so she not wanting to miss The Simpsons at about 7 p.m. After she returned home, Rosario, her mother, came back from work and saw her daughter in her room, where she had her books spread out on the floor for homework. Rosario didn't notice anything unusual and left to go to their country house, which was about half an hour away, to pick up bathing suits and other items for a planned beach outing the next day. Rosario returned around 9:30 p.m., and by then, Assunta was no longer in the apartment. Rosario became worried because little girl hadn't called or mentioned any plans to go out, which was unusual for her. Thinking maybe she had gone to see friends, Rosario started calling the girl's friends and Alfonso, but nobody had seen she. Rosario was the last person to see Assunta alive, making her one of the first individuals the detectives focused on, and she was questioned at the station. During her discussion with the police, Rosario recalled the incidents of July 4th, the night of the first attack. When they returned from the store that evening, Assunta closed the front door but left the key in the lock. Her mother didn't notice, and they went to bed. Around 3 a.m., Rosario was awakened by cries for help. Rosario rushed to her daughter's room and saw a large man pinning little girl to the floor, seemingly trying to strangle her. She attacked the intruder, but he was very strong and easily threw her against the wall. Fortunately, no one was harmed, and the attacker fled. Rosario described him as a strong, middle-aged man dressed in black, wearing a mask and gloves, so it is not possible to give a more detailed description. Assunta told her friend about what happened and even sent several photos showing red marks on her neck. Assunta's father, Alfonso, mentioned that little girl had struggled with depression for a long time and was taking medication prescribed by doctors. This was confirmed because Assunta talked to friends and shared her experiences. Recently, she had been speaking more positively about her situation, saying she felt much better. However, after Assunta was first attacked, Rosario did not investigate to find out what was happening to her daughter. She cited Assunta's fragile emotional state and said she feared contacting police would upset Assunta. This explanation was not very convincing. Over the years, Assunta had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital because she often expressed end-her-life thoughts. Besides, she is very tired because of the overload of knowledge at school and extra classes. The nanny also said that Rosario had recently become very frustrated with Assunta, as little girl was no longer meeting Rosario's expectations, and her academic performance had declined. She had become somewhat of a burden, prompting Rosario to consider sending her to study in Poland. However, Rosario did not mention this to the detectives, so they decided to investigate Rosario's immediately. They were particularly interested in the country house Rosario visited on the day Assunta disappeared. As it turned out, when detectives got there, they found Assunta's body lying just 4 kilometers away. Rosario appeared surprised to see them. She was furious. She quickly headed to the second floor, clearly trying to hide something. When a detective checked a nearby trash can, he found a piece of orange rope inside, identical to the one used to tie Assunta's hands and feet. There was also a black mask and gloves. All these items were collected for examination, but unfortunately, no fingerprints or DNA were found. The investigative committee conducted several autopsies. They did not measure the body temperature immediately, fearing it might compromise the evidence, so the exact time of death couldn't be determined. However, it was estimated that Assunta was killed around 8 p.m. The cause of death was suffocation. Her mouth and nose were covered with a soft object, likely a pillow, which prevented her from breathing, leading to unconsciousness and eventually death. In addition, an autopsy determined that Assunta had taken at least 27 lorazepam pills on the day of her death, 9 times the normal amount for an adult. Hair tests revealed this was not the first occurrence. Little girl had overdoses 3 months before her death, starting when the attacker first breaks into the home. It's important to note that overdoses of this drug can cause amnesia and loss of muscle control. The drug was used to treat anxiety disorders and insomnia. The police discovered that Rosario used it to combat depression, but it was not prescribed for Assunta. No one could explain why Assunta took the drug. According to Rosario, the criminals gave Assunta medicine so she wouldn't remember the incident. Detectives conducted a review of CCTV footage in the area to track Assunta's movements that day. Around 2 p.m., she visited her father, Alfonso. At 5:21 p.m., she returned home, and at 5:28 p.m., Rosario returned home. At 6:20 p.m., a gas station camera recorded a green Mercedes belonging to Rosario. She admitted the car was moving towards a house in the country. It was clear that besides the driver, there was a girl in the car, identified as Assunta. They were heading in the direction where Assunta's body was later found. The new testimony completely contradicted Rosario's earlier statements, making she the primary suspect in the murder. Therefore, she was questioned again. Rosario's face showed fear and shame because she had let her adopted daughter go missing while she was responsible for taking care of the girl. Then, she offered a different version of events. According to her, they went out to get swimsuits together, but when they arrived at the country house, Assunta refused to enter with her. Assunta chose to stay in the car while Rosario took everything she needed and did some small work. However, this took longer than expected, and Assunta wanted to return home to do chores and rest. Rosario agreed and drove her daughter back. But she dropped her daughter off about a 20-minute walk from their apartment to avoid navigating the narrow streets. However, the police reviewed CCTV footage from the outskirts of Santiago but found no evidence of Rosario taking her daughter back home. They only saw footage of Rosario leaving her country house alone around 9 p.m. Her story is full of controversial and contradictory details. She appeared to look at the detectives with arrogance, displaying coldness and showing no regret over the loss of her child. She persistently insisted that the large man in black was involved in the incident. When the police interviewed the Botera family's neighbors, one mentioned hearing screams at night in July, when Assunta was first attacked. He also observed something unusual. Even though the attacker entered an area where dogs lived, the dogs were silent, indicating that the attacker was very familiar with them. All in all, everything seemed suspicious, making them even more suspicious that Rosario and Alfonso were involved in the murder of their adopted daughter. The police considered different theories about the first home invasion. Some thought it was fabricated by Rosario, while others suspected it was the parents' first attempt at murder. Few believed an outsider was involved. On September 24th, Rosario and Alfonso held a funeral, during which they behaved oddly, even taking a selfie in front of the coffin. Due to inconsistencies in her testimony, Rosario was arrested after the funeral. By then, detectives had discovered what might have been the motive behind the crime. Witnesses came forward with information about incident from 9 months prior to the tragedy, and this may have been the beginning of the bloody end. In January 2013, Rosario started a relationship with a realtor named Manuel Garcia, whom she hired to sell real estate. Manuel was married and made it clear he would not leave his family. He considers the relationship with Rosario to be nothing more than an affair. Rosario was fine with this, and their secret relationship continued. During this time, her relationship with her husband, Alfonso, quickly deteriorated. She finds Alfonso boring and considers him a failure who overestimates himself. She described him as insensitive, while her lover, Manuel, was the complete opposite. After Alfonso finds messages from Rosario's lover on his wife's phone, they divorced in February 2013. Rosario and her daughter Assunta continued living in the apartment. She maintained her business and visited a country house. Custody of the daughter, Assunta, was shared, and both parents have the right to see the little girl. After Assunta's parents divorced, she lived in both her father's and her mother's houses. Many observed that she was always close to her mother, while her relationship with her father was not as warm. However, her father made efforts to improve their relationship. He also repeatedly told his ex-wife Rosario that they would be forever tied together through their adopted daughter. Is it possible that because Rosario wants to completely cut off contact with her ex-husband, so she will cause the innocent child to leave forever? It is known that earlier in the summer, Rosario had to end her relationship with her lover, Manuel. Alfonso took advantage of the opportunity, he convincing Rosario to end her relationship with Manuel in exchange for his help with their daughter while she was in the hospital. And Rosario agreed to this request. However, it was revealed that on September 21st, Rosario broke her promise, she spending most of the day with Manuel and only returning home in the evening. This is very suspicious, because soon after, Assunta was killed. During the investigation, numerous assumptions were made, including one significant point emphasized by the defense. They argued that male DNA was found on the clothes of Assunta's, indicating a man's involvement. While it was considered possible that the mother was not involved in the crime, this scenario was deemed unlikely. Police have stepped up their investigation, collecting documents for analysis, focusing on identifying male DNA on Assunta's body. Several options were considered during the investigation. At first, Alfonso was suspected, but then all attention turned to Manuel. However, he had an alibi and had no motive to harm Assunta, so he was quickly dismissed as a suspect. Surprisingly, the DNA was identified as belonging to a stranger named Rama, a Colombian citizen who lived in Madrid, about a 6-hour drive from Santiago, where the incident occurred. This may seem strange. When questioned, Ramra fervently denied any connection to the case, claiming he had never been to Santiago and had no involvement in the murder. Indeed, Ramra had an alibi. He was having dinner at a restaurant in Madrid with his girlfriend and was captured on CCTV footage there. Why had Assunta been taking prescription drugs in the months leading up to the incident without any prescription? Further examinations revealed that only a portion of the DNA traces found belonged to Ramra. The lab staff suggested that the match could be due to poor quality samples or contamination. There were even suggestions that someone might have intentionally tampered with the sample's DNA to mislead the investigation. At this stage, many questions remained unanswered, and detectives considered even the most unlikely scenarios. Rosario and Alfonso seemed indifferent to what happened to their adopted daughter. Rosario was the last person to see Assunta alive, and the press speculated that she could have acted alone. Despite her fragile appearance, but investigators doubted she could physically manage Assunta's body. Using cell phone towers, police tried to determine the whereabouts of Rosario and Alfonso at the time of the incident. On that day, their phones were turned off. This makes the police even more suspicious of them. However, Rosario explained it was a coincidence, and their phones just run out of battery at the same time. They don't have any bad intentions. After talking to a local pharmacist, who was also a friend of Rosario's, they discovered that Rosario first contacted the pharmacist on July 5th. The day after an intruder broke into the house and attacked Assunta. After that, this drug lorazepam was purchased in large quantities by Rosario. Considering all the circumstances, the detectives decided to arrest Alfonso Botera. Some of Assunta's teachers had noticed unusual behavior in her. One day, Assunta attended her violin lesson with her father, Alfonso, and she seemed unable to control herself. Alfonso explained that his daughter was just under the influence of allergy medication. The teachers observed that she was usually very reserved and did not share her problems. The drowsiness incident occurred repeatedly, but the parents always had excuses, typically citing her health condition. The teacher was suspicious and distrustful of the girl's parents. When the police interviewed Assunta's teacher, she described Assunta's symptoms and behavior, which matched many side effects of the medication. 2 days before the tragedy, the last suspicious incident happened. On that day, Rosario informed the teacher that her daughter couldn't attend class due to a severe reaction to prescribed medications. After hearing this, the detectives were convinced that the adoptive parents knew about the medications and attempted to poison Assunta. Although Rosario and Alfonso were divorced, but Alfonso was determined to reconcile with she. In June 2013, 3 months before the tragedy, Rosario experienced a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized. During this time, Alfonso moved back in, feeling optimistic as his wish to reunite with his family seemed to be coming true. During this period, Rosario ended her relationship with her lover. Alfonso visited her in the hospital and cared for her after her discharge. It seemed like family matters were improving, but later it was revealed that she had lied, she continuing her affair and meeting her lover on the day of the murder. Given the new information, the investigation believes that Alfonso sought revenge. Perhaps he wanted to cause Rosario more pain than he had to endure from her betrayal. This could explain why the orange rope ended up in the trash at the country house. It was simply tossed there by Alfonso. However, why was Rosario so alarmed when the police arrived, and why did she immediately check the trash? She likely knew about these items and was an accomplice. The police have discovered a new clue. Whenever Alfonso was at home with Rosario and Assunta, the little girl be drugged with lorazepam. However, Alfonso refused to comment on this, claiming he was not guilty. After the arrest, Rosario's behavior was unstable, alternating between hysteria and depression. Meanwhile, Alfonso remained quiet and calm, he constantly trying to reassure Rosario's by saying they just needed to love and support each other, and that everything would soon be over. Despite his soothing words, the police noticed his cold demeanor. Eventually, the police found the storage media Alfonso used. It turned out that the hard drive on his laptop had been completely replaced. Experts discovered that over 500,000 photos and videos had been stored on it, likely compromising material. The police also found that he had an unhealthy interest in Asian girls on his social media page. Evidence showed he had dozens of interactions and correspondence with Asian girls, and according to investigators, the photos suggested these girls were minors. Additionally, he often showed interest in adult Asian women with very youthful appearances. Later, a woman who owned an escort agency approached the police. She confessed that Alfonso was a regular at her establishment, always requesting only Asian women and insisting they dress as schoolgirls. Even his wife was aware of this preference. Photos of the murdered Assunta in revealing clothes made the situation even more serious. The prosecutor focused on how the seemingly calm and quiet Alfonso had cruelly treated his adopted daughter Assunta. The charges suggested that Rosario and Alfonso were criminals covering for each other, with both involved in Assunta's death. What could have motivated the crime? Rosario and Alfonso refused to cooperate with the investigation and wouldn't communicate without their lawyers. Later, on their attorney's advice, they completely stopped commenting on the tragedy. Forensic psychiatrists were crucial to the investigation. They analyzed Rosario and Alfonso's behavior and identified them as narcissists with personality disorders. It appeared they adopted Assunta to present a loving family image, pressured by Rosario's parents. Sadly, Assunta became a mere pawn for them, and once she was no longer needed, they first exploited her and then decided to eliminate her. A 15-year-old acquaintance of Assunta testified for the prosecution. Although Alfonso claimed he stayed home all day until the evening on the day of the murder, this was proven false. The girl saw him around 6 p.m. near Rosario's house, a fact later confirmed by camera footage. Alfonso was captured on camera at 9 p.m. after Assunta had disappeared. These conflicting details added to the evidence against Rosario and Alfonso. The trial was highly controversial, with even the judge's conduct coming under scrutiny. Many suspected he sought fame, suspicions that were later validated when he authored a book about the case after the trial concluded. Relatives and neighbors of the Botera family watched for years as the foster parents tried to create the best environment for Assunta. They are financially well off, ambitious and have a tough personality, but those close to them notice their devotion to Assunta. Many people still believe that the trial's outcome was a miscarriage of justice. In court, Rosario and Alfonso maintained their innocence. Alfonso remained calm and reasonable, while Rosario often cried, became hysterical. She puzzled in her testimony in justifying his behavior with the effects of the drug. Rosario's cousin testified at the trial and shared some new information. In 2011 and 2012, Rosario's parents both passed away suddenly at home. Their deaths were suspected to be under unusual circumstances. The cousin believed that Rosario was involved in the murders of her parents and daughter to inherit the entire property. However, the defense attorney rejected these claims. Rosario's mother passed away at the age of 77 and her father passed away at the age of 88. Both passed away peacefully from old age in their sleep in their beds. Although doctors found nothing unusual, their bodies, like Assunta's, were cremated, making it impossible to verify any unnatural causes of death. Meanwhile, the prosecutor contended that Rosario and Alfonso were true sociopaths. Alfonso was apparently a pedophile who drugged his daughter and chose to record these incidents. Assunta posed a threat of exposing them, leading to the decision to eliminate her. This theory was supported by numerous photographs and evidence indicating that Alfonso had an unhealthy obsession with young Asian girls. It is likely that Rosario was complicit in these activities or was at least aware of them but chose to protect Alfonso's wrongdoings. Alternatively, Rosario might have seen the girl as a burden and decided to eliminate little girl with the help of Alfonso. On October 30, 2015, the court found Rosario and Alfonso guilty and sentenced each to 18 years in prison. After beginning their sentences, they both appealed, but their appeals were rejected. On November 18, 2020, Rosario was discovered dead in her prison cell with a belt around her neck. This was her third try to end her life. Alfonso remains imprisoned and maintains his innocence. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Stephanie Ruggeberg. This incident occurred in 2002 and involved 15-year-old Stephanie Ruggeberg. She had an older brother and was born in Lüdenscheid, Germany. In 2002, her mother, Sylvia, decided to move to Spain for the summer, specifically to the Balearic Islands. Sylvia had planned to start a new phase in her life after divorcing the father of her children, believing the island would be a great place to rethink things. Sylvia had begun a relationship with a man named Peter. Before moving to her new home, Sylvia left her two teenage children, Stephanie and her brother, in Germany with their grandparents. She came to the island first to find an apartment and prepare for the move in the summer. To help with this, she found a temporary job as a manager at a 5-star hotel on the island, working there during the day. Meanwhile, Stephanie and her brother were excited about the holiday and began packing their belongings. On the first day of the summer holidays, Stephanie and her brother went to Mallorca, where their mother, Sylvia, planned to stay for the summer and return in September. She rented an apartment and moved in with Peter and his children. For 15-year-old Stephanie, this was a momentous event. She was eager to embrace life in Mallorca, especially the nightlife, which suited her age and personality. She loved going to parties, quickly making friends with other young people on the island, and often stayed out late, sometimes not coming home for days. She was often seen in bars and clubs, usually with other girls and sometimes with boys. Sylvia was very upset about the situation. Every time Stephanie returned from late-night parties, Sylvia would worry about her daughter, leading to conflict between them. This tension also affected Peter, who often tried to ease Sylvia's worries. Instead of enjoying their time together, Peter felt the need to address Stephanie's behavior in order to restore peace in the family. At the age of 15, Stephanie faced a difficult choice. She wanted to enjoy her time with her friends on the island, but she also felt pressured to listen to her mother. Although Stephanie understood that her actions were causing her family pain, Sylvia tried to convey her concerns to Stephanie. This caused a temporary strain in their relationship, and Stephanie felt hurt for a few days. Eventually, she realized that her family cared about her and her safety. After a few days, Stephanie began to feel better, and it seemed that her family was mending their relationship. However, Stephanie wanted to enjoy her time off with her friends. Since the summer holidays were coming to an end and she was going back to Germany to go back to school, Stephanie asked to spend more time with her friends during the holidays. In return, she promised to be more responsible and come home on time, respecting her mother's rules. After a few discussions, Sylvia finally believed her daughter's reasoning. On July 31, 2002, Stephanie asked her mother again if she could go out with friends. The conversation about school quickly reassured Sylvia. Moreover, Stephanie had been acting responsibly for the past week. Eventually, she went out to enjoy herself, promising to be home before midnight. Her family decided not to wait for her and went to bed, hoping she would honor her promise this time. Waking up early, Sylvia stepped out of her bedroom and noticed Stephanie's bag carelessly left on the hallway floor. Sylvia immediately suspected that her daughter had come home late and was a bit tipsy, leading her to toss her things aside and head straight to her room. Sylvia intended to take the bag to Stephanie's room and check on her. However, when she entered, Sylvia was surprised to find it empty. It turned out that Peter had woken up before Sylvia but hadn't seen Stephanie. Now, Sylvia was concerned because she had no idea where her daughter was, and the family began to feel anxious. Stephanie had a history of frequent partying and coming home late. Stephanie would even stay with friends or spend the night at parties, sometimes not returning for days. Worried that her daughter had fallen back into these old habits, Sylvia planned to confront Stephanie when she returned home. However, as the days passed and Stephanie still hadn't returned home, Sylvia's worry turned to fear and panic. After a week of searching for her daughter on her own, she decided to contact the police. During that time, she contacted all of Stephanie's friends she knew, visited their homes, and spoke to their parents. Unfortunately, no one had seen Stephanie for quite some time. By early August, Sylvia had contacted the local police to report that her daughter had been missing for a week. Since the incident had occurred some time ago, the police quickly began their search. They spoke to Stephanie's closest friends and began questioning bouncers at clubs, as well as tourists and bartenders at bars frequented by Stephanie and her friends. However, no one knew where Stephanie was. A week had passed, events were happening every day, and new parties were being held, making it easy to forget details. In an effort to jog memories and gather new information from the local community, the police and Stephanie's family distributed flyers with her photo all over town. Unfortunately, the leads they received did not lead to any breakthroughs. During this time, Stephanie had no contact with her family. She did not use a card, phone, or messaging app, which is very unusual for someone her age. Kidnapping seemed unlikely, as no one had contacted her family or demanded ransom during this time. Coast Guard and helicopters patrolled the coast and waters as part of the investigation. Meanwhile, Stephanie's family continued to search for her body. Sylvia believed she was alive and may have made new friends, but everyone else understood that the chances of her being returned safely were slim. The investigation stalled as no leads were found in the case. Sylvia then decided to take matters into her own hands. She first searched Stephanie's room thoroughly. Although the police searched the room for clues, they found nothing. Sylvia felt she knew her daughter better than anyone else, which gave her hope. Her persistence was rewarded when she discovered a note in Stephanie's diary mentioning a young man named Marcus. He lived in Dusseldorf but happened to be in Mallorca during the summer. It turned out that Stephanie had met Marcus at a beach party in Palma, and several of Stephanie's friends confirmed this. Sylvia continued to search Stephanie's room and found a camera with film inside. She discovered some recent photos taken shortly before Stephanie went missing. She decided to develop the photos to see what they revealed. Meanwhile, the police were actively searching for Stephanie and spoke to the two sisters who were with Stephanie the night she went missing. The sisters reported that they had spent the entire evening going to bars and clubs. The three girls had enjoyed the summer together in Mallorca, spending their days at the beach and their nights at local parties and venues. That same evening, the three friends had a good time before going to a bar in El Arenal where the sisters' father worked. The police later discovered a clue. According to the timeline, the girls arrived at the club around 9 p.m. From the start, Stephanie was focused on the DJ. She impressed him and she left the party with him before returning to her friends. They all continued to enjoy the evening together. Around midnight, the sisters decided to go home, but Stephanie insisted on staying until the party ended because she was still interested in the DJ. Sylvia provided the police with the photos from Stephanie's camera for detailed analysis. Among the images, there was one showing Stephanie standing with a young man. The club staff helped the police quickly identify him as Marcus, a 19-year-old DJ who was familiar with Stephanie. The police then visited his home. From the outset, Marcus seemed very nervous but allowed the police to enter his apartment. During their conversation, he acknowledged that he had seen Stephanie that evening and that they had spent time together. They both left the club around 1 in the morning after his DJ shift ended. Initially, he claimed that Stephanie came to his house after the party and left about an hour later. Police quickly became suspicious of Marcus' honesty when they discovered a missing watch and a dress in his home that matched the one Stephanie had worn at the party. The dress had dark red stains on it, making Marcus the prime suspect. Despite this, he maintained that Stephanie had changed clothes and left the apartment unharmed, claiming that she had spilled wine on her dress. Although his testimony was unconvincing, police did not have enough evidence to arrest him or file charges. They sent Stephanie's clothes for analysis. With the circumstances surrounding Stephanie's disappearance unclear, police continued their investigation, focusing on Marcus. On September 20, 2002, a month and a half after the disappearance, a witness contacted the police. He reported finding something suspicious at an abandoned farm in the El Arenal area. Police arrived at the site, which was a large building that had been empty for a long time. Inside, they discovered the badly decomposed body of a female wearing pajamas, underwear, and socks. At first, the police could not identify the body due to its condition. Many began to suspect it was Stephanie, who had been reported missing and was being actively searched for. Police collected a DNA sample and compared it with her mother's DNA, confirming that the body was Stephanie's. The police were unable to link Marcus to the murder. Although some of Stephanie's belongings were found in his apartment, there was no evidence that she had been attacked there. The red stain on her dress turned out to be wine, and Marcus's friends confirmed his alibi about changing clothes. So who could have attacked Stephanie? By this time, Stephanie's family had returned to Germany. Her brother had started school, and Sylvia had returned to work. The police decided to investigate Stephanie's family members more closely, having strong suspicions that she had returned home that night, as her belongings and handbag were present at the house. The main focus of attention was Peter, her mother's boyfriend who lived with Stephanie's family. He was unhappy with Stephanie's behavior, which worried her mother. As a result, Peter often expressed his frustration with Stephanie when she came home late or went to parties. The police in Germany brought Peter in for questioning. He denied any involvement in Stephanie's disappearance and death, but he did provide some valuable information. While the family were in Mallorca renting an apartment, they had a neighbor named Torsten, a man from Germany. Sylvia introduced him to the island and secretly allowed him to stay in the apartment without the landlord's permission to reduce the shared rent. For this reason, they did not initially report the arrangement to the police, as the arrangement was illegal. Torsten was worried about potential legal problems, but Peter believed that Torsten was a kind and calm person who would not cause any trouble. Spanish police investigated Torsten, a new suspect in the case. He was living in Uperda, Germany. He was also in Mallorca at the time of the crime. He had a troubled criminal record, including convictions for robbery and sexual assault. Alarmingly, Torsten had left Mallorca. Spanish and German police joined forces to search for him. Initially, they could not find him at his registered address in Germany, so they began gathering information from local residents, especially his neighbors. The police were quickly alerted by a local resident, a 50-year-old auto mechanic. He reported that in February 2003, Torsten came to him with a white minibus. Torsten requested the installation of an emergency light signaling system above the driver's cabin and asked to paint the vehicle in bright colors. He also wanted the windows tinted so that no one could see him inside, even in bright light. Additionally, he asked to remove the seat and create a large sleeping area, similar to a double bed. The mechanic found several aspects of Torsten's requests suspicious. First, he discovered a receipt for the minibus, which had been rented from a car rental service. This raised a red flag for the mechanic. Why would someone invest in modifying a vehicle that wasn't theirs? Second, he noticed a suspicious bag containing odd items. Strange balls, cable ties, several adult toys, and pills. However, the mechanic did not think much of it at the time. He realized that Torsten was planning to modify the car, and the items in the bag suggested disturbing sexual fantasies. The car was later discovered in a nearby town. Police tracked down Torsten, who was quickly arrested and charged with murder. He denied any involvement in the crime. Police discovered what was described as a sex kit bag in the converted car. The kit included items described by a mechanic as cable ties, various sex toys, women's underwear, anesthetics, sleeping pills, and explicit photographs of several girls. 2 bottles of chloroform with Spanish labels and a toy pistol were found, likely used to scare and trick victims into the car. Torsten had purchased chloroform from a drugstore, and a pharmacist confirmed this. When the police contacted the car rental company, it was discovered that the minibus had been reported stolen, which intensified the suspicion surrounding Torsten. Forensic tests on Stephanie's body revealed the presence of chloroform, which prosecutors considered significant evidence linking Torsten to the crime. At home, the Torsten used chloroform to incapacitate the Stephanie before assaulting her. Chloroform is a powerful sedative that can linger in the body after inhalation, but its effects don't last long if the person is alive. Experts believe that Stephanie died from inhaling too much chloroform, which led to poisoning. During the investigation, police discovered a bag containing suspicious items, as well as another woman's handbag in the car. Inside the handbag, they found documents that helped them identify the owner. She was an 18-year-old girl who fortunately survived her encounter with the Torsten. The victim explained that she had met Torsten by chance in the parking lot, exchanged a brief greeting, and then continued on her way. She later found herself waking up in an unfamiliar van. According to her statements, she did not suffer an overdose and survived the incident. Luckily, the girl was able to identify her attacker. The second victim also reported that she was not harmed. She escaped after regaining consciousness from chloroform. At that time, Torsten was absent from the vehicle, allowing her to flee through an unlocked back door and disappear. Torsten has been charged with the assault on this girl, but suspicions around him persisted after Stephanie's body was discovered on an abandoned farm. Forensic experts conducted thorough examinations of the remains and the site. They found evidence indicating that the killer had been in close proximity to the decomposing body for over a month. This was further supported by specially trained dogs that accurately detected Torsten's scent. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Torsten refused to admit his guilt. In order to get Torsten to talk, one of the police officers agreed to share a cell with him. While in the same cell, the officer quickly developed a rapport with Torsten and managed to get a recorded confession from him. Torsten admitted to killing Stephanie but claimed it was an accident. He explained that they met in her apartment after she returned from a party. He had been watching her for some time, waiting for the right moment to strike. That night, he felt the right moment had come. Stephanie was drunk and her family was asleep, so he decided to make his move. Torsten began to harass Stephanie, who tried to fight him off. This led to an argument between them. He did not go into details but claimed that Stephanie had attacked him first. In response, he pushed her, causing her to hit her head and lose consciousness. Surprisingly, he never mentioned the anesthetic found in her system. Torsten panicked and quickly moved Stephanie's body from the apartment to an abandoned farmhouse. He stayed with the body, worried about being discovered, until he finally decided to flee to Germany. His story seemed unbelievable because Stephanie had no head injuries, suggesting he had lied about how the death occurred. It was also strange that Stephanie's relatives did not immediately suspect the neighbor who had gone missing around the time of Stephanie's murder. For years after the murder, the prosecutor's office finally charged Torsten with assault resulting in death. The charge carries a 10-year prison sentence, and the prosecutor's office sought the maximum sentence. However, Torsten's attorney argued that his confession had been improperly obtained, meaning the recording could not be used to support the charges. The defense argued that Stephanie's body had been accidentally contaminated with chloroform after the autopsy. While this explanation seemed implausible, it was important to disprove it through further investigation. Ultimately, the accidental chloroform contamination theory was rejected. Forensic experts determined that the chloroform levels in Stephanie's blood were too high to be accidental. It was concluded that Torsten had intentionally poisoned Stephanie to prevent her from reporting her to the police. The prosecutor's office also asserted that Torsten's confession had been obtained legally, which was sufficient to file charges. Torsten was diagnosed with an antisocial personality disorder and exhibited clear narcissistic traits. His lawyer asked for leniency, arguing that Torsten had a troubled childhood. His parents separated shortly after he was born, and he grew up in a challenging environment. He experienced several abusive stepfathers and was ultimately abandoned by his mother. Frequent moves and changes of schools made it difficult for him to form lasting relationships. Torsten had no close friends and described his relationships with others as non-existent. His mother occasionally reappeared in his life, only to vanish again. The lawyer explained that these experiences negatively impacted Torsten's early life. He had no understanding of kindness, love, or parental care, which contributed to his antisocial behavior. He frequently found himself in trouble and often acted as a bully, leading to constant conflicts. Following the initial hearings, Torsten received a 10-year prison sentence, the maximum allowed. Both Torsten and his lawyer disagreed with this ruling. The lawyer continued to fight for Torsten and succeeded in getting the case reviewed. The judge ruled that the confession obtained illegally would not be considered evidence. The jury found Torsten guilty of premeditated murder and added another year for concealing evidence. The prosecutor's office convincingly demonstrated that the killer had been waiting for his victim in her apartment. She had returned home, changed into her pajamas, and was getting ready for bed when he attacked her, raped her, and then killed her to cover up his crime. To hide Stephanie's body, Torsten took her to a nearby farm. There, Torsten lived close to the body for over a month, constantly fearing that he would be discovered. During this period, he took part in all the search efforts, was present at almost every search operation, and provided significant support to the family of Stephanie. All of this was intended to distract suspicion away from him. Until the criminal was finally caught, the family of Stephanie had no idea that they had welcomed a man into their home who had escaped from prison in another country. He was wanted for multiple robberies and had also been accused of sexually assaulting another girl using chloroform. In prison, Torsten behaved well and even assisted the priest. He completed his sentence and was released after 11 years. Stephanie's family wanted a harsher punishment and were disappointed with the leniency of his sentence. The police in both Spain and Germany, who were involved in the joint investigation, shared their concerns. They viewed Torsten as a potential threat, fearing that it was only a matter of time before he would attack again, possibly leading to more rapes and murders. Torsten is currently living in Germany, but his exact location and identity remain unknown. And he has not been involved in any new criminal activities, at least for now. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Christopher Sutton. On Sunday, August 22, 2004, the Sutton family experienced a devastating tragedy following Susan's 57th birthday celebration. The celebration included Susan, her husband John, their son Christopher, his girlfriend Juliet, and family friend Teddy Montoda. After the party, Susan and John went to bed in separate rooms at their home in the upscale Coral Gables neighborhood near Miami, Florida. One night, a tragic event occurred. Susan usually slept in a separate room because her husband, John, snored loudly. While they were sleeping, a car stopped about 4 blocks away from their house. A man dressed in black was approaching their house with the intention of killing Susan and John. The attacker was armed with a 9mm Glock pistol and broke into Susan's house. He first went to John's bedroom and shot him twice in the head. He then moved to the room where Susan was sleeping, shot her 6 times, and left. The police were notified of the incident. Police and ambulances were dispatched to the scene shortly afterwards. Unfortunately, doctors determined that Susan, 57, had died. John was still alive but had suffered serious injuries and had lost a lot of blood. He was taken to hospital, where paramedics worked frantically to save him, although his chances of survival were slim. Before being taken to hospital, John said that he could not see the shooter in the dark and did not know who it was. Forensic experts began examining the crime scene, while police questioned neighbors and searched for surveillance cameras. Although no cameras were found, but neighbors reported seeing a suspicious man dressed in dark clothing running away from the house. There were no signs of forced entry. The killer had accessed the home through the sliding glass doors. The house was intact, with no money or jewelry taken, indicating to police that this was not a robbery. The attack was clearly targeted at killing Susan and John. But the motive behind the murder remains unknown. Melissa Sutton was 18 years old when her parents were attacked. As a freshman living on her own, she couldn't attend the celebration at their house. She was devastated to learn about her mother's death. Overwhelmed with grief, she went to see her father in the hospital. She described him as looking very unwell. John had miraculously survived 2 gunshot wounds to the head, leaving doctors astonished that he was still alive, although he remained in serious condition. When John woke up in intensive care, he realized he was blind. Additionally, he was experiencing severe shock. He felt unsafe in the hospital, constantly fearing that the killer might return. This left John feeling endangered. He was eager to leave the hospital and find a safe place to hide. His fears were taken seriously, so a guard was assigned to his room, and police patrolled the area around the clock. Due to the severity of his injuries, John was also unable to hear anything. He didn't hear the shots fired at his wife and was unaware of what happened to Susan. As he slowly started to recover, he asked Melissa how his wife was. She did not answer because the police had advised her not to say anything that might upset John further. He later found out that his wife had been murdered by her attacker. The news was a huge shock to him. Susan's death was a huge loss for the whole family. She had devoted her life to being a loving mother. Susan spent many years as an intensive care nurse, a respected profession in the United States. Her career ended in the late 1970s when she decided to stay at home with her husband, John, after the birth of their first child, Christopher. They made this choice because Susan had been unable to conceive for 7 years, at which point they decided to adopt a daughter, Melissa. The police discovered that John had built a successful business and may have had enemies. They also learned that he had received previous threats of violence. The police investigated everyone who had had animosity toward John and Susan, but they all had solid alibis. While the police searched the crime scene for evidence, they discovered that Susan's purse, jewelry belonging to her or her husband, were still intact. Although these items were visible, the police planned to interview John, but he had difficulty communicating. However, he was able to provide some useful information. Although he could not identify the shooter, he recalled seeing a dark figure at the door. The attacker may have been dressed all in black or may have been African American. John could not be certain in the darkness. Unfortunately, this information was not useful to the police. The police decided to speak with Teddy, a family friend who was at the party before the shooting. They visited his house for an interview. Teddy explained that he was on the phone with Susan at the exact moment the shooting happened. He heard a gunshot, followed by silence. Feeling frightened, he called the police, got into his car, and rushed to the Susan family's home, arriving just after the police. Teddy was very shaken by the attack on Susan. However, the police found his account unusual. They questioned why he was still talking to Susan when everyone else had already left the party, leading them to suspect an affair. Teddy clarified that he was not just a family friend but also a business partner. He claimed that they were discussing an urgent business matter and that he frequently communicated with both John and Susan to handle various issues, so he didn't find his late conversation with Susan abnormal. During the conversation, Teddy told the police that the shooters were professional and trained shooters. The police found this information interesting and took Teddy's gun for testing. Teddy was also called into the station for a lie detector test. The police believed he was hiding something and continued to question him. Teddy eventually confessed that he was in a romantic relationship with Susan. The police have often seen love triangles that can lead people to commit terrible acts. However, Teddy's gun did not match the weapon used in the attack and his phone was tracked to a location far from the crime scene at the time of the shooting. Teddy denied any involvement in the attack on John and Susan. Although his lie detector test was deemed inconclusive, it was suggested that his anxiety stemmed from trying to keep his affair with Susan a secret to avoid damaging his relationship with his friend John. John had a strong and trusting relationship with Teddy. Shortly before the incident, John and Teddy received one of the largest payouts in their law firm's history, over $1 million, and they celebrated this occasion extravagantly. Teddy was ruled out as a suspect, and the police decided to investigate other family members instead. An examination revealed that John could not have physically inflicted the shot on himself, so he was not considered a suspect. Their daughter Melissa has a solid alibi because she was in another city and also passed a lie detector test. The police then investigated Christopher Sutton. He had a girlfriend named Juliet. They had attended a family party together. Christopher quickly claimed that he and Juliet had gone to the movies the night before and provided their tickets as evidence. Juliet confirmed his story. The police then requested the cinema's surveillance camera footage, confirming that they had indeed gone to the cinema that night and confirming their alibi. After leaving the hospital, John moved in with Christopher so he could care for him for a while. However, disturbing evidence was discovered that Christopher actually wanted to kill his parents. He even threatened to kill his mother during a fight. Christopher became the prime suspect in the case. Additionally, Christopher had a criminal record that included vandalizing a teacher's home. When Christopher was 16, his parents, John and Susan, decided to send him to a reform school. Christopher was aggressive and had trouble controlling his anger, which made it difficult for him to socialize with other teenagers. He changed schools at least 6 times. He often skipped school. John would drop him off at the main entrance, walk to the door, but then Christopher would sneak out through another exit and go do his own thing. However, his absences were not his biggest problem. He also got involved in some criminal activities. One day, he and a group of friends broke into a teacher's house, causing damage and graffiti. As a result, Christopher was arrested and the teacher filed a lawsuit against him. The damage was estimated to be in excess of $50,000, and his parents had to pay it. Christopher's family had no financial problems and could easily pay the fine. However, his family was frustrated with their son's out-of-control behavior and did not know how to handle him. Christopher was a difficult teenager who had no respect for adult authority. His rebellion began with his love of piercings and tattoos, which his parents strongly disapproved of. Despite their efforts, they were unable to change his behavior, which led to more problems. One day, Christopher pointed an unloaded rifle at his mother and sister, threatening to kill them. Shortly before Christopher's 16th birthday, Susan discovered a note in his room that outlined a plan to kill his parents to inherit their money. Susan informed John about the note, and they confronted Christopher, who dismissed it as a joke. However, when his parents saw the note, they became frightened. From that point on, they were afraid to be alone with their son in the house. They even sought legal help, which led to a court-ordered rehabilitation program. Staff from a specialist organization forcibly transferred Christopher to a rehabilitation facility on the island of Samoa called Paradise Bay. It is a strict school for troubled youth. In 1998, when Christopher first arrived at this institution, his behavior became extremely aggressive, leading to him being restrained. Following this, he was taken to a remote camp in the mountains, where he was left tied up. The staff aimed to re-educate him through these strict measures. Typically, such severe discipline was effective and helped even the most challenging cases to improve. After spending a year in a behavior correction facility, Christopher sent his parents an emotional video message. In it, he described the violence he experienced there and accused his parents of not loving him for sending him to such a place. Upon hearing this, his parents visited institutions for troubled teenagers in Samoa but found nothing wrong. As a result, they did not believe Christopher's claims. They knew about the strict rules in place and believed they were intended to benefit troubled teens. Furthermore, Christopher was there under a court order, so his parents could not take him away. However, Christopher still hoped to leave the facility when he turned 18. John then received a court order stating that Christopher would remain in custody. The program at Paradise Bay was extended for another year, which surprised Christopher. But he had no choice but to remain at the facility. In 2000, Paradise Bay was closed after management faced multiple allegations of youth mistreatment. Christopher finally returned home on his 19th birthday, after 30 months at Paradise Bay. This situation raised concerns for the police, as his anger at being mistreated could be considered a motive for murder. After enduring such torture, Christopher may have felt the urge to take revenge on his parents. However, after returning from Paradise Bay, he changed. Christopher always showed that he had become a caring and calm son, especially in how he took care of his father following an incident. John could not believe that his son could be involved in the case, believing that Christopher had changed. However, the police suspected that Christopher had orchestrated the double murder, which was only partially successful because his father survived. Although Christopher had an alibi, he may have hired someone else to carry out the crime. The police needed to gather evidence to support their suspicions. So they brought him in for a second interview. In this conversation, Christopher reveals details that have not been revealed to the public and remain confidential. Christopher said he went to the scene of the incident. He saw the shooter walking down the hallway, and his mother Susan had been shot 6 times, information that was later confirmed during the investigation. Christopher also recounted the order in which the shots were fired and other key details. While Christopher appears distraught and cries over his mother's death, the police believe he is lying and is actually a criminal. However, Christopher was supported by his girlfriend Juliet, who also seemed shocked by the incident. She said she herself had been in shock for a long time, following the news of the shooting. Juliet met Christopher when she was 17, and he was 19, having just returned from a school for troubled youth. She described him as kind, polite and courteous, and he made a strong positive impression on her. He treated her like a true gentleman. So she could never imagine that he could commit murder. Juliet said that his parents welcomed her into their family. His mother, Susan, taught her how to apply makeup and helped her develop her dressing style. His father, John, also supported her by giving her a job at his law firm. The couple's parents supported them financially without expecting anything in return. They were happy to see the couple together. When police first encountered Christopher at the crime scene, it was shortly after he had been informed of the incident. He appeared to be very upset, and one officer noticed tears on his face. However, his initial statement to police during questioning shattered the impression of sadness. He quickly explained that he and Juliet had had dinner with their parents but left at around 9 p.m. to go to the movies. He then gave the police their movie tickets. Instead of asking how his parents were doing, he focused on justifying his actions and emphasized his alibi before any charges were brought. Police carefully reviewed surveillance footage from the cinema, which showed Christopher leaving after the movie around midnight. They noticed he immediately used his mobile phone to make a call, arousing curiosity about who he was contacting. The police quickly checked all his calls. Police later determined that Christopher had contacted a man named Garrett Kopp 331 times in the days leading up to the murder, which raised suspicions. Garrett, a police officer with a criminal record, had come to the attention of police. They suspected he might be involved in the crime. The case drew attention to Garrett's troubled past, including multiple arrests, adding to police suspicions. Police began to consider Garrett as a potential suspect. At the time of the case, he was out on bail. When police examined the weapon used in the murder, they found it to be very similar to Garrett's Glock, so he was taken to the station for questioning. Garrett had a tense conversation with the police and later admitted to attacking John and Susan. However, Garrett insisted that he did not act on his own. He said that Christopher had threatened to kill him and his son if he did not comply. Garrett insisted that the idea for the attack was entirely Christopher's. He also said that Christopher had given him the gun and had left the door unlocked, allowing him easy access to the house. The police arrested Garrett and charged him with murder, but his testimony was not enough to keep Christopher in custody. Juliet was questioned by police who believed she had more information than she was revealing. Despite their efforts, she denied any involvement and insisted on her innocence for several hours. The interrogation lasted 13 hours in total, but the police did not record it. Later, Juliet alleged that police had threatened her with arrest to force a confession and acted provocatively during the questioning. However, she eventually admitted that Christopher felt a strong resentment towards his parents for placing him in a facility for troubled teenagers. Recently, his parents tried to push him to get a job and start covering his own costs, which he found unacceptable, and this led to family conflicts. During questioning, Juliet revealed that Christopher had been planning revenge on his parents for years. He often spoke about the inheritance and how they could live without worries if he could take everything his parents had earned. However, she didn't take his threats seriously. The police had gathered enough evidence to obtain an arrest warrant for Christopher Sutton. However, by that time, he had disappeared. This was a crucial moment for the police, as they feared that Christopher might return to harm John. Fortunately, the police were able to locate and arrest Christopher, charging him with the murder of his mother and attempted murder of his father. Garrett Kopp and Christopher Sutton were eventually tried separately, and both faced the death penalty. Christopher, however, maintained that he had no role in planning the crime. The defense argued that the police were unfair, claiming that the police pressured Juliet, which influenced her testimony. After Garrett learned that he could face the death penalty, Garrett decided to cooperate with the prosecution by pleading guilty to a lesser charge, which was in his favor. He was then sentenced to 30 years in prison. The prosecution's case took a turn when Juliet appeared in court to testify. She revealed that Christopher had often expressed anger at his parents for not giving him money, even saying that they deserved to die for their actions. The defense argued that much of Juliet's testimony was given under police pressure and should be excluded from the case. However, the judge denied this request. In court, Juliet maintained that she had been truthful during her interrogation with the police. She stated that she viewed Christopher's anger as mere frustration and never believed he would go on to commit such serious crimes. After Juliet's testimony, John, the surviving father, shared his thoughts. After hearing all the witness testimony, John believed that Christopher was capable of committing the crime. John noted that even after leaving the hospital, Christopher continued to try to manage the family's finances, which led him to believe that Christopher was involved in the crime. When it was Christopher's turn to speak, he accused Garrett of attacking their parents due to his drug addiction. Christopher highlighted several moments when Garrett was out of control due to drugs, claiming that during those times he was dangerous and capable of committing any crime. Christopher also mentioned that he kept drugs in Susan's bedroom closet. That Garrett might have entered the house to steal illegal drugs. However, the prosecutor argued that the scene did not appear to be a burglary, everything was intact, even the money and jewelry were intact. If it was a burglary, Garrett would have taken valuables. In his defense, Christopher claimed that he had changed and overcome the anger, resentment, and disappointment he felt towards his parents for sending him to a special school. He believed that he had changed for the better. After extensive deliberation, the jury found Christopher Sutton guilty of first-degree murder and attempted murder. Christopher was shocked by the verdict because he was sure that he would be acquitted. Christopher received 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Currently, survivor John Sutton is putting in great effort to regain his eyesight. He has formed a new relationship and started a family, and at 70 years old, he continues to practice law. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Leon Britz. The Sharetha and Leon Britz case of 2020 not only shocked South Africa, where it took place, but also attracted international attention. From the very beginning, the investigation identified an innocent person as the prime suspect. Only through a surprising confession was the real culprit revealed. The Leon family, European immigrants, moved to the small town of Patter in the Northern Cape province of South Africa in the early 1970s. While Patter is modest in size, it plays a significant role as an economic and tourist center in the Bushmanland region. Leon has an older brother named Toki. Leon's family is relatively wealthy for their community. His father owns the only large hotel in the area, which later expanded into a large hotel and restaurant complex. Both Toki and Leon did well in school. After finishing school, Toki left his hometown, while Leon chose to stay. He helped his parents run the hotel as a teenager and studied business. Leon is intelligent and has a natural talent for business, which has helped him run the hotel effectively. At the Leon family hotel, many events, parties, and celebrations took place. During one of these occasions, Leon spotted a beautiful young girl among the guests. She was a brunette with green eyes and a charming smile. Curious, he approached her to introduce himself and discovered that she was only 14 years old and still in school, although she appeared much more mature. This revelation confused Leon, who was 25 at the time. Despite his concerns, he asked her to dance, and afterwards, they spent about an hour talking on the terrace. The girl's name was Sharetha, and from that moment, Leon could not stop thinking about her and eagerly anticipated their next meeting. Sharetha was born on September 6, 1990, the youngest of 3 children to immigrants from Eastern Europe. Her family faced severe financial hardship. When Suretha was only 9 years old, her father died of a snakebite, leaving her mother to raise 3 children on her own while struggling to provide for them. As a result, all 3 sisters had to go to work to help support the family, leading to a difficult and arduous childhood. Leon, a rich guy, suddenly entered her life. Leon truly loved her. He found every opportunity to see her, picked her up from school, took her to trendy restaurants, gave her expensive gifts and trendy clothes, and tried his best to make her happy. Suretha experienced the luxuries and wealth. She realized that with him, she had the ability to build a family where she and her future children would never have to worry about money. Suretha's mother approved of the relationship, despite her daughter's young age. She considered Leon to be trustworthy, decent, and kind, and no one doubted his sincerity. However, Leon's parents were quite concerned about the relationship, as it could lead to serious legal problems if it went too far. Despite their concerns, Leon insisted that he was willing to wait until Suretha turned 18 when he planned to marry her. About a year into the relationship, 15-year-old Suretha discovered she was pregnant. She was unsure about sharing the news, knowing that it would upset both her mother and her boyfriend. To hide her changing body, she began wearing baggy clothes and became quiet and withdrawn. Eventually, she couldn't keep it a secret any longer and decided to tell Leon. When she revealed the news, Leon was stunned. He realized that the situation would not only damage his reputation, but also create serious legal problems. Leon was worried about being accused of seducing a young woman, so he couldn't let that happen. He took her to a private clinic, where they confirmed she was pregnant with twins. Leon found a doctor at the same clinic who would perform anonymous abortions. Suretha was heartbroken. Leon, who had promised to love and protect her, was now pressuring her to end the lives of their unborn children. Leon, who was older, convinced her that it was necessary. He promised that after marriage they would have children, but now having children would ruin their lives and their dreams of a happy future together. Left with no other choice, Suretha agreed to the procedure. She experienced physical pain for days afterward, but the emotional trauma was even worse, leaving her feeling guilty and deeply depressed. She isolated herself in her room, crying constantly. Her mother did not understand the severity of the situation, thinking that her daughter was simply upset after an argument with her boyfriend, believing that things would be better once they made up. A few days later, Leon visited Suretha at her home. He then took her into town to walk around the park and do some shopping. He thought this would help her feel better. Although she eventually returned to her normal routine, her feelings of resentment and suspicion towards him remained. 3 years later, during her senior year of high school, the Suretha discovered she was pregnant again. She was just a few months away from turning 18, and this unexpected pregnancy was not supposed to create any significant problems. However, when she informed Leon, he reacted very negatively and insisted that she terminate the pregnancy, claiming they were too young to start a family. This time, Suretha firmly refused, stating that she would keep the child, even if it meant raising it alone. After some consideration, Leon eventually proposed to her, presenting a diamond ring. By this time, the intense feelings they had for each other had faded, but Suretha's pregnancy left him with no choice. Shortly after her 18th birthday, the couple got married in a lavish ceremony. Although they appeared happy, they both had doubts about their decision. A few months later, they welcomed their first son, and 2 years later, they had twin boys. The family lived a wealthy life. Leon's parents built a successful business over many years. Leon also started his own fast food chain and restaurant, which was thriving. However, starting in the mid-2010s, the family faced significant challenges. In 2014, Leon's father suddenly passed away due to long-standing heart problems, which affected his mother's health. She began to show signs of rapid dementia, forcing her sons to take her to a specialist clinic for care. Toki returned to his hometown after many years to assist his younger brother in managing the family business, and together they took over the operation of a hotel. Leon decided to let Suretha join the family business, something she had always wanted to do. They agreed to register a mining equipment and tools store in her name. She worked hard at the store while also caring for their 3 young sons. However, as the twins grew older, the parents had to find a suitable school for all of their children. Finding quality education in South Africa was not easy. They eventually found a good school in the nearby town of Kakamas, about 75 miles from Leon's home. They then rented a spacious house in Kakamas for Suretha and her sons to live in, while Leon stayed in Poeter to manage the business. Although Suretha enjoyed running the store, she had to give up that role to focus on raising the children. The family only visited Leon on weekends and holidays, and he rarely came to Kakamas because of his busy schedule. At first, everything seemed fine between the couple, but over time, they grew more distant, and their feelings for each other faded. In 2018, Suretha began experiencing health issues, which she initially dismissed. However, medical tests revealed that she had cancer and cardiovascular problems. She quickly underwent surgery to remove the malignant tumor and began a treatment plan. Thankfully, the timely intervention saved her life, but she now required ongoing therapy at a clinic in Johannesburg, which was quite costly. Leon's family was able to pay for Suretha's medical expenses. To help manage the household while she was receiving treatment, Suretha hired a nanny and a maid. By this time, Leon and Suretha had grown apart and were living separate lives. Suretha began an affair in Johannesburg. It appears that Leon was also seeing other women, as evidenced by explicit photos and text messages found on his phone. The couple now only stay in touch because of their 3 children. Despite the family problems, business is doing well. The hotel, retail stores and restaurant chain are making a significant profit. Leon has invested some of this money in real estate in major cities, which provides a good income through rentals. Their family is not only the richest in Poeter, but also one of the richest in the Northern Cape province. As Leon's business grew more profitable, he faced increasing threats from jealous people who wanted to harm him, his parents, and his brother. To protect his assets, he installed safes and hidden compartments in his office and home, where he stored cash in various currencies, stocks, diamonds, jewelry, and gold bars. Although the threats initially worried him, Leon eventually began to ignore them as they became a regular occurrence. He believed they were just attempts to scare him. A tragic event occurred that led to Leon's death. On October 7, 2020, Suretha called him to check on their dogs. A neighbor reported that they had escaped. Leon assured her that he would call back after checking on the dogs, but he never did. Worried, Suretha tried calling him several times, but no one answered. She left their children with a nanny and drove to their home in Poeter. When she arrived, the front door was unlocked, but the house was eerily quiet and no one answered her calls. She went to the backyard and discovered her husband's body floating face down in the pool. There were wounds on his back, indicating that he was dead. In a panic, Suretha called the police, then contacted Toki to inform him of the situation. When the police arrived, they quickly sealed off the house. They found that Leon had died violently. His body had multiple stab wounds and signs of a struggle. A safe in the house had been opened and its contents taken. Initially, the police theorized that a burglar had broken into the house. And Leon was home at the time, leading to a confrontation that left Leon dead. However, many other valuables that could be seen in the house were still intact, suggesting that the burglars had specifically targeted the contents of the safe. Following Leon's murder, much speculation about the cause of his death arose on social media. Many people knew about the threats Leon had received over the years and suspected that competitors or enemies may have acted on those threats. Police later identified Leon's brother Toki as the prime suspect. Toki had managed the family business with Leon for many years and had visited Leon shortly before the murder, making Toki the last person known to have seen Leon alive. Complicating matters, their mother is critically ill, with doctors estimating that she has only a few months to live. It is rumored that Toki is unhappy with the way the estate has been divided, especially with Leon receiving the lion's share, and that Toki may want to change the will. This theory explains why other items in the house were left intact and why the killer only targeted the contents of the safe. However, Toki adamantly denied any involvement, claiming that he would never harm his brother, especially since they had never had any conflicts over money. He sought the support of Suretha, who expressed her belief in his innocence and offered to help him find a good lawyer. For nearly 2 months, the investigation had stalled with no new evidence, leads, or witnesses. Then, 35-year-old Jacques Van Vuren walked into the police station and proposed a deal. He would plead guilty and reveal the identities of his accomplices in exchange for a lighter sentence. Jacques and Suretha had been friends in school, and he had feelings for her, but she did not love him and eventually started dating Leon. They had not seen each other for many years, but one day they ran into each other at a shopping mall and started talking. Jacques was having a hard time at the time. He had gone through a divorce, lost his job, was an alcoholic, and was in dire need of money. Suretha realized that Jacques still had feelings for her, so she opened up to him about her unhappy marriage. She told him that her husband was abusive and treated her badly, but she felt trapped because he threatened to take their sons away and leave her nothing. Jacques was prevented from seeing his children by his ex-wife after the divorce, so he felt a deep sympathy for Suretha and wanted to help her. They exchanged phone numbers, and a few days later, Suretha called him with a tearful story. She claimed that her husband had abused her and that she could not leave him. She suggested that the only solution was to get rid of him. Suretha was a master of psychological manipulation, and Jacques believed her. Suretha also promised to pay him 500,000 South African rand, which was a lot of money, especially when he was in dire need of money. Jacques agreed to help her, but did not want to do it himself, so he decided to hire someone else to do it. After a while, Leon's business began to decline. All his chain stores began to close and suffered huge losses. Leon wanted to sell the hotel, but Suretha did not agree. At the end of September, Suretha and Jacques decided to start their plan. Jacques asked for half of the money in advance. However, due to financial problems, Suretha could only withdraw 100,000 rand and gave Jacques her diamond ring. With this money, Jacques hired a friend named Enrich Williams, who had a drug problem and was willing to kill for money. Enrich was worried that he could not handle a strong adult alone, so he brought in his friend Amantel Bareki to help him with the plan, and Enrich would share the proceeds with Amantel. Suretha gave the criminals her home address and told them where the safe was. She allowed them to take valuables from the house to make it look like a robbery. The only condition was that the dogs were not harmed, so they were released first. The neighbors noticed that the family's dogs were out and called her. This indicated that Enrich and Amantel were in the house. She then called her husband Leon to lure him into a trap. When he entered the house, one of the criminals hit him on the head with a baseball bat, while another attacked him with a knife, leaving him no chance to defend himself. Leon was stabbed 8 times and beaten with the bat several times. They then dumped his body in the swimming pool. After opening the safe, Amantel and Enrich found no cash, only securities, diamonds, and gold bars. They gave all the stolen goods to Jacques, who then gave them all to Suretha. The criminals chose not to take anything else from the house because they were worried about leaving too much evidence. They were relying solely on the large payment that Suretha had promised. Jacques was not allowed to be present at the crime scene. Suretha was worried that he might be identified on surveillance footage, especially since Toki had seen him several times and knew him as Suretha's friend at school. Jacques was only tasked with transferring the advance payment and instructing his accomplices to carry out the plan. Jacques was so worried about everything that he drove past Léon's house several times to make sure the criminals were ready and Léon was home. Jacques' car was caught on surveillance footage. While the license plate was unclear, the police took note of the car and its identifying features, eventually identifying the owner. Additionally, there was no money in the safe, and all of the family's accounts were frozen during the investigation. Suretha could not pay the hired criminals because selling the stolen goods, such as diamonds, gold bars, or securities, would reveal her involvement. She asked them to be patient, but Enrich and Amantel refused and began threatening Jacques. In desperation, Jacques does not receive the money he expected and feels guilty. Amantel and Enrich threaten him repeatedly, and he realizes that he faces the possibility of going to prison or suffering the same fate as Léon. He confides in his sister, who speaks to their mother, and together they convince Jacques to turn himself in. They advise him to expose the others involved in the scheme so that he can receive a lighter sentence. Jacques' real motive, in his full confession to the police, was that he believed he had done a noble deed, because he saw Léon as a man who had treated his wife badly, abused her, and threatened to kidnap their children. Suretha reported to the police about the will and property disputes between Léon and Toki. She wanted to imply that Toki was the culprit. However, the police decided to investigate Suretha thoroughly to find out her true intentions. During the investigation, it was discovered that Suretha and Léon had long since fallen out of love and were living apart. Suretha had a lover in Johannesburg, and she wanted to leave Léon to be with him. However, when she asked for a divorce, Léon firmly refused and threatened to take everything from her, including their children. It's difficult to determine Léon's true motivations, but it's likely he still cared for Suretha and wanted to repair their marriage. Meanwhile, Suretha had a plan to inherit his money and business after his death, which would allow her and her lover to live well. She also wants the removal of Toki by setting him up to become a killer, after which she will become the sole owner of the hotel, store, and restaurant after her mother-in-law passes away. Her plan can work if there is money in the safe and if she pays the hired criminals. In the spring of 2021, the trial and sentencing of all involved took place. The court considered each participant's role in this high-profile case. Jacques Van Vuren, who collaborated with the prosecution, provided detailed testimony and named his accomplices. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, eligible for parole after 5 years. The hired criminals, Enrich Williams and Amantel Barecki, were convicted of premeditated murder with added cruelty and robbery. They received life sentences with no chance of parole. Suretha Britz, who planned to kill her husband, convinced the court that she was the victim throughout their relationship. She claimed that Léon forced her to have sex when she was 14. A year later, after she became pregnant, she alleged that Léon forced her to have an abortion late in her pregnancy. Although their love faded, Léon refused to divorce her and threatened to take custody of their children. Suretha was eventually sentenced to 25 years in prison. The court took into account her remorse, her sincere confession, and her role as a mother to 3 young children.